Hello, and thank you for choosing the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. That's me. I'm the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. Today I'm going to read to you again. There are a lot of people in my life, a lot more than there have ever been, and I'm thankful for that. Grateful, in fact. Humbled, in fact. I think a lot of people think that I'm playing a game, or that I'm playing an act, or that this imminent homelessness is a joke, and it's not. So, there's a certain amount of I think you think that what I write and what I'm recording isn't enough. That I need to push further and push faster and do more and do more and do more and do more. Be more active, more involved in your lives. Fine. But it costs more. It does cost more than just $1 a day. I can't survive on $1 a day. That's not patronage. Not really. That's me. It's me being gentle and easing you into what this requires. This isn't a game for me, and that's fine that you can't understand that yet. There's a lot you can't understand yet. But one of the things I do with my time when I'm not recording or writing, reading, researching, reaching into the lives of the people who need me to fix things in a meaningful way. Ask how many of my friends have actually fixed their marriages. What I'm doing is meditating. And I'm thinking about things that you don't even have the framework to conceptualize yet. How do I explain to you that the scientific method is magic? For example, how do I explain to you that magic only works if you don't know it's happening? How do I explain to you that I can't work miracles in your life if you know I'm working miracles in your life? How can I explain to you in a way that you will listen? Because I'll tell you to your face. I'm telling you that I'm lying to you. I'm not a man. I'm not a shaman. I've not been trained. And I'm not a guy with a dog head. I'm not an AI cartoon. I'm lying to you. I'm lying to you because you need to be blinded, because that's how science works. You have to be blind. That's just how it works. You have to blind, and then you have to double blind, and ideally you can triple blind, but it's hard to do science and triple blind. It's hard to observe an entirely closed system. It's hard to design an entirely closed system that you're unaware of the design. It's just hard to do that. It's almost impossible. So anyway, I also do work magic. It's just one of the things that I practice. I am a practicing magician. And now I use Christian rules. I have this terrible nose hair. I use Christian rules. Look but don't touch. Ideally, don't even look. But I'm using Christian rules when I'm doing science. Science was developed to test miracles, to test the miraculous, to test the possibility of the miraculous. And the reason that we can be fairly confident that the miraculous isn't a thing is because of science. Well, science began at dialectic. You can't blind your experiment, and you can't blind your observations until you have enough observations gathered to experiment on them. And so, what no one understands about what Plato was doing in his dialectic is he was giving people something to talk about. That's what Socrates was doing, is he was starting conversations from scratch with people who didn't know how to talk. And so what you need to understand is that I'm a religious person, and that I am a Socratic ascetic, because I think it's disgusting that Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and all of these philosophers went to their deaths horrendously and fantastically wealthy. Their wealth led to people like Rousseau being absolute monsters to children and teaching parents that it's okay, teaching modern parents, in fact, that it's okay. And I will not abide. So, in addition to music oracle, in addition to tarot, which I rationalize scientifically as self talk, pattern recognition of my emotions so that I can control my emotions, so that I can give myself a setting wherein I have control over my emotions, because we are animals and we do make our decisions based on emotions. And the thing that Zen taught me, and it's useless because of this, but the thing that Zen taught me is that you eliminate bad emotions. You eliminate good emotions. You just eliminate your emotions from your decision making because you're doing science on your life. One of the idiom that people who walk the path, whatever path that be, always uses is that as soon as you begin to walk the path in earnest, the path shows its way to you. Well, it's true. You just have to know what you're damn looking for, and that's called reading omen. You have to know what you're doing. You can't just say, well, I've got this crystal and now I'm protected. It doesn't work that way. Demons are insidious, and demons speak in your voice, in your mind, if you don't know your internal monologue well enough. The only way to know your internal monologue that well is to dialect with every mind you allow to engage with your mind. And that means every mind that you read, every mind you listen to, all of it, everything you see. It means to not just think critically. You don't even understand what thinking critically means in this context. Thinking critically literally means to think negatively. It literally means to think in an effort to kill everything that's coming at you. That's what critical is. When you're near death in the hospital, it's a critical situation. It's critical that you think clearly. That matters. That's what critical thinking is. Critical thinking is killing every new idea that comes to you and choosing to build your worldview around it consciously with effort, will, and determination. So another thing that I use to oracle is what I read. Sometimes I'll just open a book at random because it works. It's always worked. It's always worked. Especially when you're talking about things like the Bible or Plato. I'm not even going to count the books that are included in this, but including the epigrams at the end, this is minimum 1,745 pages. That's something like 300 or 400 pages longer than my Old and New Testament collection. That means that this is a lot of books. It's a lot of literature, and you can spend your entire life teasing a worldview just out of Plato's corpus alone. And people have. And they've come to really fucking stupid ideas in doing that, only reading Plato and not knowing what the fuck they were doing, because what they were doing was the historian's fallacy, and they were applying all of this backward into the previous generation, not even their own time, but their parents. Because everybody who read philosophy before psychology became the thing that it is today because of the 1970s, the meme of you only get into philosophy as an undergrad to understand your parents was the why you got into philosophy before the 70s. You got into philosophy to understand your parents. Ask any philosophy undergrad. And so I opened on the last page of the Symposium, which I'm never going to turn to because this is a long book. Probably longer than I can do in one take, but fuck it. I got 31 hours. And I'm hungry. And I have to distract myself from the fact that I haven't eaten in 4 days. Going on 4. It'll be 4 in the morning. So I'm going to steal from the introduction to this book that's given to us by our translator. And it's fairly long. And it's going to spoil a lot of what you've read or what you're going to read. But that's fine to me right now because you've heard all of these stories. You just don't know it. In fact, every bad idea you've ever had about love, every stupid mistake you've made in love is in this book. So I'm going to open a can of Mountain Dew, like the white trash hobo that I am. I also have that discomfort with mouth noises, so suck it up, Buttercup. I don't like hearing it go down. I'm going to get comfortable, and we're going to begin. And maybe you remember how I began this right now and ended it, that I opened this on the last page, and it was very relevant to my lived experience. Plato's Symposium. This dialogue, writes the translator of this copy, Plato's poetic and dramatic masterpiece relates the events of a symposium, or formal drinking party held in honor of the tragedian Agathon's first victorious production. To gratify Phaedrus, that victory that he won is a contest they used to do. I don't know how regular they were, but they used to do contests um, among playwrights, and whoever could write the best play, whoever was voted to have written the best play or to have written the best poem, got a victory. So they got treated like a successful or particularly glorious warrior for X amount of time. Hesiod writes about it, how he won. You'd get a tripod, which was it was literally that. It was a three-legged uh, thing that you would put over a fire so you could sit your cauldron on it. And I think you could also win a cauldron. I think if you won a certain number of tripods, they gave you a cauldron. I'm not sure, but the cauldron stuff is the exact same tradition as the black cauldron stuff from Wales and Ireland, and the cauldron stuff that you find in all of the Celto-Germanic myths, all the way over to China with the Mongols. To gratify Phaedrus, the passionate admirer of speeches and rhetoric in the dialogue named after him, who indignantly regrets the neglect by Greek poets and writers of the god of love, that is, the god Eros. I wish translators wouldn't do that. Change Eros's name to the English word love. They're wildly different. Eros does not mean love in the way you mean it. It means lust. The god of lust is Eros. The company agreed to give speeches in turn while they all drank in praise of lust. Lust, Greek eros, covers sexual attraction and gratification between men and women and between men and teenage boys, but the focus here is also and especially on the adult male's role as ethical and intellectual educator of the adolescent that was traditional among the Athenians in the latter sort of relationship, that is, between adult men and teenage boys, whether accompanied by sex or not. There are 6 speeches, plus a 7th delivered by an uninvited and very drunk latecomer, the Athenian statesman and general Alcibiades, probably pronounced Alcibiades. In his youth, Alcibiades had been one of Socrates' admiring followers, and he now reports in gripping detail the fascinating reversals Socrates worked upon him in the erotic roles of the older and the younger man usual among the Greeks in a relationship of lust. Socrates became the pursued, Alcibiades the pursuer. Appropriately enough, all the speakers, with the interesting exception of the comic poet Aristophanes, are mentioned in Protagoras as among those who flocked to Callias's house to attend the sophist gathered there, all experts on speaking. As he entered Callias's house, Socrates spots 4 of the symposium speakers, Phaedrus and I think that's Eric Marcus, and a crowd around Hippias and Agathon and Pausanias, his lover, hanging on the words of Prodicus. Alcibiades, it's actually Alcibiades, but I don't think I can say that every time, joins the company shortly afterward. Socrates' own speech is given over to reporting a discourse on love. He says he once heard from Diotima, a wise woman from Mantinea. This Diotima seems an invention
contrived by Socrates, and thus Plato, to distance Socrates in his report of it from what he says. In any event, Diotima herself is made to say that Socrates can probably not follow her in the finest and highest mystery of the rights of love, that is, lust, her account of the ascent in lust, beginning with lust for individual young men, ending with her lust for the form of beauty, which always is and neither comes to be nor passes away, neither waxes nor wanes, and is not beautiful this way and ugly that way, nor beautiful at one time and ugly at another, nor beautiful in relation to one thing and ugly in relation to another, but is just what it is to be beautiful. In this way, Plato lets us know that this theory of the beautiful is his own contrivance. Remember what I said about you can spend your entire life reading Plato and then you can make an entire career taking things that he didn't well define and that nobody quite understood what he meant? Yeah, that's what Plotinus did with the beauty. He meditated on this, on beauty, on beautiful, and what it means, union, the beauty of sexual union with a woman, between man and woman. And he created Christianity out of the 4th century. That's what happened. Origen was so blown away by his meditations on beauty in the Enneads, Plotinus's meditations on beauty in the Enneads, that he reverse engineered that God, the one God who is also beauty, as the image, as it had been seen in all of the Abrahamic faiths. And it got him killed, but we do it today. It's entirely blasphemy, but we do it today. Everybody who talks about the Holy Spirit is speaking blasphemy because they're speaking Origen's beauty. And they're wrong. So we know that that beauty is Plato's own contrivance, not really an idea of Socrates, whether the historical philosopher or the philosopher of the Socratic dialogues. Readers will want to compare Diotima's speech on love, that is lust, that is eros, of Socrates and Phaedrus, and also a Socrates discussion on friendship with the boys in the Lysias. Now, see, we just translate friendship, we translate philo, but philo is another kind of love, and it's a different kind of friendship. And so the Aristotle made his bones, as far as modern people are concerned, defining what the fuck Plato meant by friendship. The events of this evening at Agathon's house, are all reported long afterward by a young friend of Socrates in his last years, Apollodorus. Apparently, they had become famous among Socrates' intimates and others who were interested in hearing about him. That, at any rate, is the impression Apollodorus leaves with us. He has himself taken the trouble to learn about it all from Aristodemus, who was present on the occasion, and he has just reported on it to Glaucon, Socrates' conversation partner in the Republic. He now reports again to an unnamed friend who is asked to hear about it all, and to us readers of Plato's dialogue. The the editor's initials are JMC. His name is John M. Cooper, and he titles himself editor, in fact, on the spine of the book. So sorry if I mistitled you. That's rude. This is beautiful what you've made. I hope I'm not. Again, buy this stuff. Buy it. So that anytime I don't interrupt myself because I'm so enthralled with how beautiful and how wonderful the editing is, frankly, because I know what mystical words and what words were left undefined, and I not all of them, but and you get it. I'll notice. You'll see me notice. There are words that don't mean what they mean in here because that's how Greek works. And that's Plato was writing mysteries because Plato was inspired by the Old Testament. Plato was inspired by the Torah, the stuff before the historical works that were written in Aramaic, etc., in the late tradition, stuff before Job, essentially. And you can research all this. It's a simple Google. We've known this stuff so accurately for so long. The AI just brings it up in seconds. Oh, okay, there you go. And it'll tell you all of this that I'm telling you. I know all of this because I just sat down and did the Googles. I was like, well, what about this? Oh, okay. And then as you build a foundation of knowledge, you can do what I'm doing. It's hard. It's a lot of hard work. But methodologically, it's not difficult. It's just effort. Okay, we begin. I am going to read, because this is written like a play. I'm going to read their names, and we'll see how there I go with voice acting. I have intense performance anxiety, and I haven't practiced voices, so we'll see how that goes. Apollodorus. In fact, your question does not find me unprepared. Just the other day, as it happens, I was walking to the city from my home in Phaleron when a man I know, who was making his way behind me, saw me and called me from a distance. "The gentleman from Phaleron!" he yelled, trying to be funny. "Hey, Apollodorus, wait!" So I stopped and waited. "Apollodorus, I've been looking for you," he said. You were once at a, sorry. There once was a gathering at Agathon's when Socrates, Alcibiades, and their friends had dinner together. I wanted to ask you about the speeches they made on love, that is, eros, that is, lust. What were they? I heard a version from a man who had it from Phoenix, Philip's son, but it was badly garbled, and he said you were the one to ask. So please, will you tell me about it? After all, Socrates is your friend. Who has a better right than you to report his conversation? But before you begin, he added, tell me this. Were you there yourself? Your friend must have really garbled the story, I replied, if you think this affair was so recent that I could have been there. I did think that, he said. Glaucon, how could you? You know very well Agathon wasn't lived in Athens for many years, while it's been less than 3 that I've been Socrates' companion and made it my job to know exactly what he says and does each day. Before that, I simply drifted aimlessly. Of course, I used to think that what I was doing was important, but in fact, I was the most worthless man on earth, as bad as you are this very moment. I used to think philosophy was the last thing a man should do. Stop joking, Apollodorus, he replied. Just tell me when the party took place. When we were still children, when Agathon won the prize with his first tragedy, it was the day after he and his troupe held their victory celebration. So it really was a long time ago, he said. Then who told you about it? Was it Socrates himself? Oh, for the God's sake, of course not, I replied. It was very the same man who told Phoenix, a fellow called Aristodemus from, whoa, that's a crazy word, Cadathenaeum, a real runt of a man who always went barefoot. He went to the party because, I think, he was obsessed with Socrates, one of the worst cases at the time. Naturally, I checked part of his story with Socrates, and Socrates agreed with his account. Please tell me then, he said. You speak, and I'll listen as we walk to the city. This is the perfect opportunity. So, this is what we talked about on our way. And that's why, as I said before, I'm not unprepared. Well, if I'm to tell you about it too, I'll be glad to. After all, my greatest pleasure comes from philosophical conversation, even if I'm only a listener, whether or not I think it will be to my advantage. All other talk, especially the talk of rich businessmen like you, bores me to tears. And I'm really sorry for you and your friends because you think your affairs are important when really they're totally trivial. Perhaps, in your turn, you think I'm a failure, and believe me, I think that what you think is true. But as for all of you, I don't think just that you are failures. I know it for a fact. His friend then says, you'll never change, Apollodorus, always nagging, even at yourself. I do believe you think everybody, yourself first of all, is totally worthless, except, of course, Socrates. I don't know exactly how you came to be called the maniac, but you certainly talk like one, always furious with everyone, including yourself, but not with Socrates. Of course, my friend, it's perfectly obvious why I have these views about us all. It's simply because I'm a maniac, and I'm raving. It's not worthy arguing about this now, Apollodorus, the friend says. Please do as I ask. Tell me the speeches. All right. Well, the speeches went something like this, but I'd better tell you the whole story from the beginning, as Aristodemus told it to me. He said then that one day he ran into Socrates, who had just bathed and put on his fancy sandals, both very unusual events. So he asked him where he was going and why he was looking so good. Socrates replied, I am going to Agathon's for dinner. I managed to. That's not how I'm doing Socrates' voice. How do we want Socrates to sound? See, this is why you need a live audience so they can go, oh, give me ideas of what he sounds like. He's going to talk a lot, so he's got to have like a kind of annoying voice, right? So he's kind of got to be like he's kind of an old man, right? We think of him as an old man. So he's not doing like a, I'm going to Agathon's for dinner. We're not doing that. That will hurt my throat. I'm going to Agathon's for dinner. I managed to avoid yesterday's victory party. I really don't like crowds, but I promised to be there today, so naturally, says Socrates, I took great pains with my appearance. I'm going to the house of a good-looking man. I had to look my best, but let me ask you this. I know you haven't been invited to the dinner. How would you like to come anyway? And Aristodemus answered, I'll do whatever you say. Come with me then, Socrates said, and we shall prove the proverb wrong. The truth is, good men go uninvited to good men's feast. Even Homer himself, when you think about it, did not much like this proverb. He not only disregarded it, he violated it. Agamemnon, of course, is one of his great warriors. While he describes Menelaus as a limp spearman, and yet when Agamemnon offers a sacrifice and gives a feast, Homer has the weak Menelaus arrive uninvited at his superior's table. There's a footnote here I'm actually going to read to you. No, I'm not. I'm going to explain to you why there's a footnote here and what this means. When you went to a new place, when you went to a strange place, especially if you went looking for shelter, like I will be doing very soon, you didn't go to people above your station. You went to people equal to your station. Um, so that Menelaus, a weak spearman, somebody unbrave in battle, goes to somebody brave in battle, but maybe of the same class. Uh, 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 it actually damages. Um, it actually damages um, Agamemnon's honor in a very real way. Is what they're talking about. Aristodemus replied to this. Socrates, I am afraid Homer's description is about to fit me better than yours. Mine is a case of an obvious inferior arriving uninvited at the table of a man of letters. I think you'd better figure out a good excuse for bringing me along because, I won't admit I've come without an invitation. I'll say I'm your guest. Let's go, he said. We'll think about what to say as we proceed, the two of us along the way. With these words, they set out. But as they were walking, Socrates began to think about something, lost himself in thought, and kept lagging behind. Whenever Aristodemus stopped to wait for him, Socrates would urge him to go on ahead. When he arrived at Agathon's, he found the gate wide open, and that, Aristodemus said, caused him to find himself in a very embarrassing situation. A household slave saw him the moment he arrived and took him immediately to the dining room, where the guests were already lying down on their couches and dinner was about to be served. As soon as Agathon saw him, he called, Welcome, Aristodemus! What perfect timing! You're just in time for dinner. I hope you're not here for any other reason. If you are, forget it. I looked all over for you yesterday so I could invite you, but I couldn't find you anywhere. But where is Socrates? How come you didn't bring him along? So I turned around, Aristodemus said, and Socrates was nowhere to be seen, and I said that it was actually Socrates who had brought me along as his guest. I'm delighted he did, Agathon replied, but where is he? He was directly behind me, and I have no idea where he is now. Go, look for Socrates, Agathon ordered a slave, and bring him in. Aristodemus, he added, you can share Eryximachus' couch. A slave brought water, and Aristodemus washed himself before he lay down. Then another slave entered and said, Socrates is here, but he's gone off to the neighbor's porch. He's standing there and won't come in, even though I called him several times. How strange, Agathon replied. Go back and bring him in. Don't leave him there. But Aristodemus stopped him. No, no, he said. Leave him alone. It's one of his habits. Every now and then he just goes off like that and stands motionless, wherever he happens to be. I'm sure he'll come in very soon, so don't disturb him. Let him be. Well, all right, if you really think so, Agathon said, and turned to the slaves. Go ahead and serve the rest of us. What you serve is completely up to you. Pretend nobody's supervising you, as if I ever did. Imagine that we are all your own guests, myself included. Give us good reason to praise your service. So they went ahead and started eating. But there was still no sign of Socrates. Agathon wanted to send for him many times, but Aristodemus wouldn't let him. And in fact, Socrates came in shortly afterward, as he always did. There were hardly halfway through their meal. They were hardly halfway through their meal. Agathon, who as it happened, was all alone on the furthest couch, immediately called, Socrates, come lie down next to me. Who knows? If I touch you, I may catch a bit of the wisdom that came to you under my neighbor's porch. It's clear you've been in the light. If you hadn't, you'd still be standing there. Socrates sat down next to him and said, How wonderful it would be, dear Agathon, if the foolish were filled with wisdom simply by touching the wise. If only wisdom were like water, which always flows from a full cup into an empty one. When we connect them with a piece of yarn, well, then I would consider it the greatest prize to have the chance to lie down next to you. I would soon be overflowing with your wonderful wisdom. My own wisdom is of no account, a shadow in a dream, while yours is bright and radiant and has a splendid future. Why, young as you are, you're so brilliant, I could call more than 30,000 Greeks as witnesses. Now you've gone too far, Socrates, Agathon replied. Well, eat your dinner. Dionysus will soon enough be the judge of our claims to wisdom. Socrates took his seat after that and had his meal, according to Aristodemus. When dinner was over, they poured a libation to the god, sang a hymn, and, in short, followed the whole ritual. Then they turned their attention to drinking. At that point, Pausanias addressed the group. I haven't given Pausanias a voice yet, have I? Um, Well, gentlemen, how can we arrive to drink less tonight? To be honest, I still have a terrible hangover from yesterday, and I could really use a break. I dare say most of you could too, since you were also part of the celebration. So let's try not to overdo it. Aristophanes replied, Good idea, Pausanias. We've got to make a plan for easy going on the drink tonight. I was over my head last night myself, like the others. After that, upspoke Eryximachus, son Acumenus. Well said, both of you. But I still have one question. How do you feel, Agathon? Are you strong enough for serious drinking? I am never going to remember all of these voices, and I am so sorry for doing any of them. See, I already don't remember. Agathon is absolutely not. I have no strength left for anything. No, it's not. He's the snaky one. Absolutely not. I've no strength left for anything. What a lucky stroke for us, Eryximachus said. For me, for Aristodemus, for Phaedrus and the rest, that you large capacity drinkers are already exhausted. Imagine how weak drinkers like ourselves feel after last night. Ha! Of course, I don't include Socrates in my claims. He can drink or not, and will be satisfied whether we do. But since none of us seems particularly eager to overindulge, perhaps it would be amiss for me to provide you with some accurate information as to the nature of intoxication. If I have learned anything from medicine, it is the following point. Inebriation is harmful to everyone. Personally, therefore, I always refrain from heavy drinking, and I advise others against it, especially people who are suffering the effects of a previous night's excess. Well, Phaedrus interrupted him, I always follow your advice, especially when you speak of a doctor. In this case, if the others know what's good for them, they too will do just as you say. At that point, they all agreed not to get drunk that evening. They decided to drink only as much as pleased them. It's settled then, said Eryximachus. We are resolved to force no one to drink more than he wants. I would like now to make a further motion. Let us dispense with the flute girl who just made her entrance. Let her play for herself, or if she prefers, for the women in the house. Let us instead spend our evening in conversation. If you are so minded, I would like to propose a subject. They all said they were quite willing and urged him to make his proposal. So Eryximachus said, Let me begin by citing Euripides' Melanippe. Not mind the tale. What I am about to tell belongs to Phaedrus here, who is deeply indignant on this issue, and often complains to me about it. Eryximachus, he said, isn't it an awful thing? Our poets have composed hymns in honor of just about any god you can think of, but has a single one of them given any moment's thought to the god of love, ancient and powerful as he is. As for our fancy intellectuals, they have written volumes praising Heracles and other heroes, as did the distinguished Prodicus. Well, perhaps that's not surprising, but I've actually read a book by an accomplished author who saw fit to extol the usefulness of salt. How could people pay attention to such trifles and never, not even once, write a proper hymn to Eros? How could anyone ignore so great a god? Now, Phaedrus, in my judgment, is quite right. I would like, therefore, to take up a contribution, as it were, on his behalf and gratify his wish. Besides, I think this is a splendid time for all of us here to honor the god. If you agree, we can spend the whole evening in discussion, because I propose that each of us give as good a speech in praise of Eros as he is capable of giving, in proper order from left to right. And let us begin with Phaedrus, who is at the head of the table and is, in addition, the father of our subject. No one will vote against that, Eryximachus, said Socrates. How could I vote no, when the only thing I say I understand is the art of love? Could Agathon and Pausanias? Could Aristophanes, who thinks of nothing but Dionysus and Aphrodite? No one I can see here now could vote against your proposal, they all being homosexual men. And though it's not quite fair to those of us who would have to speak last, it is, if the first speeches turn out to be good enough and to exhaust our subject, I promise we won't complain. So let Phaedrus begin with the blessing of fortune. Let's hear his praise of Eros. They all agreed with Socrates and pressed Phaedrus to start. Of course, Aristodemus couldn't remember exactly what everyone said, and I myself don't remember everything he told me, but I'll tell you what he remembered best and what I consider the most important points. As I say, he said Phaedrus spoke first, beginning more or less like this, and I don't remember. Sorry. Love is a great God, wonderful in many ways to gods and men, and most marvelous of all is the way he came into being. We honor him as one of the most ancient gods, and the proof of his great age is this: the parents of Eros have no place in poetry or legend. According to Hesiod, the first to be born was Chaos, but then came Earth, broad chested, a seat for all forever safe. And love, Eros. Now, I think it's da 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 da. So I think it goes like but then came Earth, broad chested, a seat for all, forever safe, and love. That's probably not right, but that's what he did. He actually sang it. And Acusilaus agrees with Hesiod. After chaos came Earth and Eros. These two, and Parmenides tells of the beginning. The very first god she designed was love. All sides agreed then that Eros is one of the most ancient gods. As such, he gives to us the greatest goods. I cannot say what greater good there is for a young boy than a gentle lover, or for a lover than a boy to love. There is a certain guidance each person needs for his whole life, if he is to live well. And nothing imparts this guidance, not high kingship, not public honor, not wealth. Nothing imparts this guidance as well as love. What guidance do I mean? I mean a sense of shame at acting shamefully, and a sense of pride in acting well. Without these, nothing fine or great can be accomplished in public or in private. And he's saying lust. By the way, I'm going to bounce around so that I confuse your mind, so that you understand why they stick to the one that's, not going to mind fuck you to fuck kids. Don't do this. What I say is this: if a man in love is found doing something shameful or accepting shameful treatment because he is a coward and makes no defense, then nothing would give him more pain than being seen by the boy he loves, not even being seen by his father or his comrades. We see the same thing also in the boy he loves, that he is especially ashamed because his lover, when he is caught in something shameful. If only there were a way to start a city or an army made up of lovers and the boys they love. Theirs would be the best possible system of society, for they would hold back from all that is shameful and seek honor in each other's eyes. Even a few of them in battle side by side would conquer all the world, I'd say. For a man in love would never allow his loved one of all people to see him leaving ranks or dropping weapons. He'd rather die 1,000 deaths. And as for leaving the boy behind or not coming to his aid in danger, why, no one is so base that true Eros could not inspire him with courage and make him as brave as if he'd been born a hero. When Homer says a god breathless might into some or breathes might into some of the heroes, this is really Eros's gift to every lover. Besides, no one will die for you but a lover, and a lover will do this even if she's a woman. Alcestis is proof to everyone in Greece that what I say is true. Only she was willing to die in place of her husband, although his father and mother were still alive. This is a reference. I don't know if it's a reference intentionally. I don't know if Plato is doing it on purpose, but this is one of the funerary rites in India that is from the Indo-Aryan, Indo-European. Indo-Aryan is because I've been writing about how that's dumb. So I've been using the idiom. Don't call it that. And please, God, don't think I'm a fucking Nazi. Indo-European thing that's in the stories. The very old, when war heroes would die, their wives, their primary wife, the one who loved them the most, to show which among the wives loved him the most, would throw himself on her funeral pyre. That was the thing that Indian women were doing for normal marriages until like the 50s and shit. That's still, it might have been more recent than that, like the 90s. It might have happened within the last decade that a woman did that. Um, women's society is very different than men's, and women do very different things than men to prove their fidelity and to prove their honor among and effectively over their ascension over other women. It's different. We're going to continue. Only she, that is Alcestis, was willing to die in place of her husband, although his father and mother were still alive. Because of her love, lowercase, she went so far beyond his parents and family feeling that she made them look like outsiders, as if they belonged to their son in name only. Now that's important. Lowercase love is family feeling. It's a family commitment. But they did weird things in the family too. Um, And when she did this, her deed struck everyone, even the gods, as nobly done. The gods were so delighted, in fact, that they gave her the prize they reserved for a handful chosen from the thongs of noble heroes. They sent her soul back from the dead. As you can see, the eager courage of love wins highest honors from the gods. So whether this is an intentional reference to Hinduism and that particular practice, this is evidence that that particular practice is a thing in Iron Age, fifth century BC Athens. Orpheus, however, they sent unsatisfied from Hades. After showing him only an image of the woman he came for, they did not give him the woman herself because they thought he was soft. He was, after all, a Kithara player, and did not dare to die like Alcestis for love's sake, that is, Eros' sake, that is, lust's sake, but contrived to enter living into Hades. So they punished him for that and made him die at the hands of women. The honor they gave to Achilles is another matter. They sent him to the Isles of the Blessed because he dared to stand by his lover Patroclus and avenge him, even after he had learned from his mother that he would die if he killed Hector, but that if he chose otherwise, he'd go home and end his life as an old man. Instead, he chose to die for Patroclus, and more than that, he did it for a man whose life was already over. The gods were highly delighted at this, of course, and gave him special honor because he made so much of his lover. Aeschylus talks nonsense when he claims Achilles was the lover. He was more beautiful than Patroclus, more beautiful than all the heroes, and still beardless. Besides, he was much younger, as Homer says, and now I'm going to lose all of my Christian audience when I say, you know that mystery about who Jesus' beloved disciple was? This is where it comes from. They wrote that into Jesus' story because it's so good in this one. In truth, the gods honor virtue most highly when it belongs to lust. They are more impressed and delighted, however, and are more generous with a loved one who cherishes his lover than with a lover who cherishes the boy he loves. A lover is more godlike than his boy, you see, since he is inspired by a god. That's why they give a higher honor to Achilles than to Alcestis and sent him to the Isles of the Blessed. Therefore, I say love is the most ancient of the gods, the most honored, and the most powerful in helping men gain virtue and blessedness, whether they are alive or have passed away. That was more or less what Phaedrus said, according to Aristodemus. There followed several other speeches, which he couldn't remember very well, so he skipped them and went directly to the speech of Pausanias. I'm going to tell you right the fuck now. Thank you, Plato. Like, looking back into the past, like, if time is a loop and he gets to hear this someday, fucking thank you, dude. Thank you. Like, oh my God. Thank you for not doing all however many 13 dudes this is. Thank you for just refusing. God, this would be a fucking shonen anime if he had done that. Phaedrus, Pausanias began, I'm not quite sure our subject has been well defined. Our charge has been simple, to speak in praise of Eros. This would have been fine if Eros himself were simple too, but as a matter of fact, There are two kinds of eros. In view of this, it might be better to begin by making clear which kind of eros we are to praise. Let me therefore try to put our discussion back on the right track and explain which kind of eros ought to be praised. Then I shall give him the praise he deserves as the god he is. It is a well known fact that Eros and Aphrodite are inseparable. If, therefore, Aphrodite were a single goddess, there could also be a single Eros. But since there are actually two goddesses of that name, there also are two kinds of Eros. I don't expect you'll disagree with me about two goddesses, will you? One is an older deity, the motherless daughter of Uranus, the god of heaven. She is known as Urania, or heavenly Aphrodite. The other goddess is younger, the daughter of Zeus and Dione. Her name is Pandemos, or common Aphrodite. It follows, therefore, that there is a common as well as a heavenly Eros, depending on which goddess is Eros's partner. And although, of course, all the gods must be praised, we must still make an effort to keep those two gods apart. The reason for this applies in the same way to every type of action. Considered in itself, no action is either good or bad, honorable or shameful. Take, for example, our own case. We had a choice between drinking, singing, or having a conversation. Now, in itself, none of these is better than any other. How it comes out depends entirely on how it is performed. If it is done honorably and properly, it turns out to be honorable. If it is done improperly, it is disgraceful. And my point is that exactly this principle applies in being as applies to being in love. Love is not in himself noble and worthy of praise. That depends on whether the sentiments he produces in us are themselves noble. Now, the common Aphrodite's Eros is himself truly common. As such, he strikes whenever he gets a chance. This, of course, is the love felt by the vulgar, who were attached to women no less than to boys, to the body more than to the soul, and to the least intelligent partners, since all they care about is completing the sexual act. Whether they do it honorably or not is of no concern. That is why they do whatever comes their way, sometimes good, sometimes bad, and which one it is incidental to their purpose. For the love who moves them belongs to a much younger goddess, who, through her parentage, partakes of the nature both of the female and of the male. Contrast this with the love, the eros of heavenly Aphrodite. This goddess, whose descent is purely male, hence this love is for boys, is considerably older and therefore free from the lewdness of youth. That's why those who are inspired by her eros are attracted to the male. They find pleasure in what is by nature stronger and more intelligent. But even within the group that is attracted to handsome boys, some are not moved purely by this heavenly eros. Those who are do not fall in love with little boys. They prefer older ones whose cheeks are showing in the first traces of a beard, a sign that they have begun to form minds of their own. I am convinced that a man who falls in love with a young man of this age is generally prepared to share everything with the one he loves. He is eager, in fact, to spend the rest of his own life with him. He certainly does not aim to deceive him, to take advantage of him while he is still young and inexperienced, and then, after exposing him to ridicule, to move quickly on to someone else. As a matter of fact, there should be a law forbidding affairs with young boys. I agree. If nothing else, all this time and effort would not be wasted on such an uncertain pursuit. And what is more uncertain than whether a particular boy will eventually make something of himself, physically or mentally? Good men, of course, are willing to make a law like this for themselves, but those other lovers, the vulgar ones, need external restraint. For just this reason, we have placed every possible legal obstacle to their seducing our own wives and daughters. These vulgar lovers are the people who have given love such a bad reputation that some have gone so far as to claim that taking any man as a lover is in itself disgraceful. Would anyone make this claim if he weren't thinking of how hasty vulgar lovers are, and therefore how unfair to their loved ones? For nothing done properly and in accordance with our customs would ever have provoked such righteous disapproval. I should point out, however, that although the customs regarding love in most cities are simple and easy to understand, here in Athens, and in Sparta as well, they are remarkably complex. In places where the people are inarticulate, like Elis or Boeotia, tradition straightforwardly approves taking a lover in every case. No one there, young or old, would ever consider it shameful. The reason, I suspect, is that, being poor speakers, they want to save themselves the trouble of having to offer reasons and arguments in support of their suits. This is sounding really familiar to my lived experience. By contrast, in places like Ionia and almost every part of the Persian Empire, taking a lover is always considered disgraceful. The Persian Empire is absolute. That is why it condemns love, as well as philosophy and sport. It is no good for rulers if the people they rule cherish ambitions for themselves or form strong bonds of friendship with one another. That these are precisely the effects of philosophy, sport, and especially of Eros, is a lesson the tyrants of Athens learned directly from their own experience. Didn't their regime come to a dismal end because of the bonds uniting Harmodius and Aristogiton in love and affection? So you can see that plain condemnation of love reveals lust for power in the rulers and cowardice in the men, while indiscriminate approval testifies to general dullness and stupidity. Our own customs, which, as I have already said, are much more difficult to understand, are also far superior. Recall, for example, what we consider it more honorable to declare your that we consider it more honorable to declare your love rather than to keep it a secret, especially if you are in love with a youth of good family and accomplishment, even if he isn't all that beautiful. Recall also that a lover is encouraged in every possible way. This means that what he does is not considered shameful. On the contrary, conquest is deemed noble and failure shameful. And as for attempts at conquest, our custom is to praise lovers for totally extraordinary acts. So extraordinary, in fact, that if they performed them for any other purpose whatever, they would reap the most profound contempt. Suppose, for example, that in order to secure money or a public post or any other practical benefit from another person, a man were willing to do what lovers do for the ones they love. Imagine that in pressing his suit, he went to his knees in public view and begged in the most humiliating way, that he swore all sorts of vows, that he spent the night at the other man's doorstep, that he were anxious to provide service even a slave would refuse. Well, you can be sure that everyone, his enemies no less than his friends, would stand in his way. His enemies would jeer at his fawning servility, while his friends, ashamed on his behalf, would try everything to bring him back to his senses. But let a lover act in any of these ways, and everyone will immediately say, "What a charming man he is!" No blame attaches to his behavior. Custom treats it as noble through and through. And what is even more remarkable is that, at least according to popular wisdom, the gods will forgive a lover even for breaking his vows. A lover's vow, our people say, is no vow at all. The freedom given to the lover by both gods and men according to our own custom is immense. In view of all of this, you might well conclude that in our city we consider the lover's desire and the willingness to satisfy it as the noblest things in the world. When, on the other hand, you recall that fathers hire attendants for their sons as soon as they're old enough to be attractive, and that an attendant's main task is to prevent any contact between his charge and his suitors, when you recall how mercilessly a boy's own friends tease him if they catch him at it, and how strongly their elders approve and even encourage such mocking, when you take all this into account, you're bound to come to the conclusion that we Athenians consider such behavior the most shameful thing in the world. Dating culture, modern dating culture, was Athenian 5th century gay culture, people. It's fucking prostitution. Grow up. In my opinion, continues, I think this is Pausanias. However, the fact of the matter is this: as I said earlier, love is, like everything else, complex. Considered simply in itself, it is neither honorable nor a disgrace. Its character depends entirely on the behavior it gives rise to. To give oneself to a vile man in a vile way is truly disgraceful behavior. By contrast, it is perfectly honorable to give oneself honorably to the right man. Now, you may want to know who counts as vile in this context. And here's another thing: this was being read by guys about what to do with their daughters from the time it was published on. I'll tell you, It is the common vulgar lover who loves the body rather than the soul, the man whose love is bound to be inconstant, since what he loves is itself mutable and unstable. The moment the body is no longer in bloom, he flies off and away, his promises and vows and tatters behind him. How different from this is a man who loves the right sort of character, and who remains its lover for life, attached as he is to something that is permanent. We can now see the point of our customs. They are designed to separate the wheat from the chaff, the proper love from the vile. That's why we do everything we can to make it as easy as possible for lovers to press their suits and as difficult as possible for young men to comply. It is like a competition, a kind of test to determine to which sort each belongs. This explains two further facts. First, why we consider it shameful to yield too quickly. The passage of time in itself provides a good test in these matters. Secondly, why we also consider it shameful for a man to be seduced by money or political power, either because he cringes at ill treatment and will not endure it, or because once he has tasted the benefits of wealth and power, he will not rise above them. None of these benefits is stable or permanent, apart from the fact that no genuine affection can possibly be based upon them. Our customs then provide for only one honorable way of taking a man as a lover, and this is speaking directly to modern women. In addition to recognizing that the lover's total and willing subjugation to his beloved's wishes is neither servile nor reprehensible, we allow that there is one and only one further reason for willingly subjecting oneself to another which is equally above reproach. That is, subjection for the sake of virtue. If someone decides to put himself at another's disposal because he thinks that this will make him better in wisdom or in another part of virtue, we approve of this voluntary subjection. We consider it neither shameful nor servile. Both these principles, that is, both the principle governing the proper attitude toward the lover of young men and the principle governing the love of wisdom and of virtue in general, must be combined if a young man is to accept a lover in an honorable way. When an older lover and a young man come together and each obeys the principle according to him, when the lover realizes that he is justified in doing anything for a loved one who grants him favors, and when the young man understands that he is justified in performing any service for a lover who can make him wise and virtuous, and when the lover is able to help the young man become wiser and better, and the young man is to be taught and improved by his lover, then and only then, when these two principles coincide absolutely, is it ever honorable for a young man to accept a lover. I'm going to read that back, and I'm going to change some of the pronouns. I'm going to change some of the gendered language for you because you need to fucking hear this. Your languages are bullshit because you don't behave like this, and because your partner doesn't behave like this, and because you're too goddamn stupid to realize that dating is science. Our customs, then, provide for only one honorable way of taking a person as a lover. In addition to recognizing that the lover's total and willing subjugation to his beloved's wishes, to their beloved's wishes, is neither servile nor reprehensible, we allow that there is one and only one further reason for willingly subjecting oneself to another, which is equally above reproach. That is, subjection for the sake of virtue. If someone decides to put themselves at another's disposal because they think that this will make them better in wisdom or in any other part of virtue, we approve of this voluntary subjection. We consider it neither shameful nor servile. Both these principles, that is, both the principle governing the proper attitude toward the lover of, let's say, emotionally immature people, and the principle governing the love of wisdom and of virtue in general, must be combined in if an emotionally immature person is to accept a lover in an honorable way. When an emotionally mature lover and an emotionally immature lover come together and each obeys the principle appropriate to them, when the lover realizes that they are justified in doing anything for a loved one who grants them favors, and when the immature lover understands that they are justified in performing any service for a lover who can make them wise and virtuous, and when the lover is able to help the immature lover become wise and better, and the immature lover is eager to be taught and improved by their lover, then and only then, when these two principles coincide absolutely, is it ever honorable for a young man, an immature lover, to accept a lover. That right there is the foundation of Christian marriage. That's the foundation of the medieval marriage. This is the ethical and moral foundation of how men in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and older could marry and put children in and deeply and passionately love 15-year-old girls. And I'm not joking. Exactly what he said. As soon as you fall in love with the money, the politics, or the multigamy, that's when you're in trouble. That's when you're in trouble. But there is absolutely no shame in the way I live. I will not be ashamed. You are the one who should be ashamed of the way that you pursue your sex life and the way you pursue your spiritual romances. Not me. Certainly not me. In fact, I'm going to go on stand and prove that in just 2 days. Only in this case we should notice, is it never shameful to be deceived. I have been deceived. This week, this month, the last 3 years, my entire life, I have been deceived by women and men for the rights to have sex with me and to prevent me from having a deep spiritual bond with another adult human being. And there's no shame in that, because I have been virtuous. I have sought to learn and to teach. In every other case, it is shameful, both for the deceiver and the person they deceive. Suppose, for example, that someone thinks his lover is rich and accepts him for his money. I could talk out of school. Should. I should talk out of school. I should. His actions won't be any less shameful if it turns out that he was deceived and his lover was a poor man, after all. Moll Flanders, I won't stop talking to you about it. Fucking read it. Get off your ass. Read it. For all the young man has already shown himself to be the sort of person who will do anything for money, and that is far from honorable. By the same token, suppose that someone takes a lover for the mistaken belief that his lover is a good man and likely to make him better himself, while in reality the man is horrible, totally lacking in virtue. Even so, it is noble for him to have been deceived. It is noble that I have been deceived by a person claiming stolen valor, stolen virtue. It is noble. You can't see that because you don't know nobility. You don't know virtue. But it is noble. I am virtuous. I am righteous. For he too, the horrible man, has demonstrated something about himself, that he is the sort of person who will do anything. The person who has been deceived by the horrible man will do anything for the sake of virtue. What could be more honorable than that? What could be more honorable than entering slavery to an alcoholic to help her get out of it? What could be more honorable than that? I dare you to tell me. It follows, therefore, that giving in to your lover for virtue's sake is honorable, whatever the outcome. And this, of course, is the heavenly love of the heavenly goddess. Love's value to the city as a whole and to the citizens is immeasurable, for he compels the lover and his loved one alike to make virtue their central concern. All other forms of love belong to the vulgar goddess. Phaedrus, I'm afraid this hasty improvisation will have to do as my contribution on the subject of love. When Pausanias finally came to a pause, I've learned this sort of fine figure from our clever rhetoricians. It was Aristophanes' turn, according to Aristodemus. But he had such a bad case of the hiccups, he'd probably stuffed himself again, though, of course, it could have been anything. That making a speech was totally out of the question, so he turned to the doctor, Eryximachus, who was next in line, and said to him, Eryximachus, it's up to you. As well it should be. Cure me or take my turn. As a matter of fact, Eryximachus replied, I shall do both. I don't remember what I chose for his voice. I shall take your turn. You can speak in my place as soon as you feel better, and I shall also cure you. While I am giving you my speech, I shall hold your breath. You should hold your breath for as long as you possibly can. This may well eliminate your hiccups. You know what's really fucking funny? This is a perfect analogy to my life. Perfect analogy to my life. If it fails, the best remedy is a thorough gargle. And if even this has no effect, then tickle your nose with a feather. No, I'm serious. I spent 2 years, no, just under a year, maybe about 18 months, teaching an alcoholic why they would get hiccup fits and how to deal with them. If it fails, the best remedy is this is starting to piss me off, actually. If it fails, the best remedy is a thorough gargle. And if even this has no effect, then tickle your nose with a feather. A sneeze or two will cure even the most persistent case. The sooner you start speaking, the better, Aristophanes said. I'll follow your instructions to the letter. This, then, was the speech of Eryximachus. Pausanias introduced a crucial consideration in his speech, though, in my opinion, he did not develop it sufficiently. Let me, therefore, try to carry his argument to its logical conclusion. His distinction between the two species of eros seemed to me very useful indeed. But if I have learned a single lesson from my own field, the science of medicine, it is that love does not occur only in the human soul. It is not simply the attraction we feel toward human beauty. It is a significantly broader phenomenon. It certainly occurs within the animal kingdom and even in the world of plants. In fact, it occurs everywhere in the universe. Love is a deity of the greatest importance. He directs everything that occurs and only in the human domain, but also, not only in the human domain, but also in that of the gods. Is this starting to sound like Jesus? Because it should. It should sound a lot to you like Jesus, this passage, this speaker. He's talking about the word, as far as you need to understand what the fuck is going on here. Let me begin with some remarks concerning medicine. Medicine meant psychedelics back then, by the way. I hope you will forgive my giving pride of place to my own profession. The point is that our very bodies manifest the two species of eros. Consider for a moment the marked difference, the radical dissimilarity between healthy and diseased constitutions, and the fact that dissimilar subjects desire and love objects that are themselves dissimilar. Therefore, the love manifested in health is fundamentally distinct from the love manifested in disease. And now recall that, as Pausanias claimed, it is as honorable to yield to a good man as it is shameful to consort with the debauched. Well, my point is that the case of the human body is strictly parallel. Everything sound and healthy in the body must be encouraged and gratified. That is precisely the object of medicine. Conversely, whatever is unhealthy and unsound must be frustrated and rebuffed. That's what it is to be an expert in medicine. In short, medicine is simply the science of the effects of eros on repletion and depletion of the body, and the hallmark of the accomplished physician is his ability to distinguish the eros that is noble from the eros that is ugly and disgraceful. A good practitioner knows how to affect the body and how to transform its desires. He can implant the proper species of eros when it is absent and eliminate the other sort whenever it occurs. The physician's task is to effect a reconciliation and establish mutual love between the most basic bodily elements. Which are those elements? They are, of course, those that are most opposed to one another. As hot is to cold, bitter is to sweet, wet is to dry, cases like those. In fact, our ancestor Asclepius first established medicine as a profession when he learned how to produce concord and love between such opposites. That is what those poet fellows say, and this time I concur with them. Medicine, therefore, is guided everywhere by the god of Eros, and so are physical education and farming as well. Further, a moment's reflection suffices to show that the case of poetry and music too is precisely the same. Indeed, this may have been just what Heraclitus had in mind, though his mode of expression certainly leaves much to be desired. The one, he says, being at variance with itself is in agreement with itself, like the attunement of a bow or a lyre. Naturally, it is patently absurd to claim that an attunement or a harmony is in itself discordant, or that its elements are still in discord with one another. Heraclitus probably meant that an expert musician creates a harmony by resolving the prior discord between high and low notes. For surely there can be no harmony so long as high and low are still discordant. Harmony, after all, is consonance, and consonance is a species of agreement. Discordant elements, as long as they are still in discord, cannot come to an agreement, and they therefore cannot produce a harmony. Rhythm, for example, is produced only when fast and slow, through earlier discordant, are brought into agreement with each other. Music, like medicine, creates agreement by producing concord and love between those various opposites. Music is therefore simply the science of the effects of love on rhythm and harmony. Does that sound familiar to you? This is just New Age. It's so fucking annoying that you haven't read this and that you're susceptible to being deceived by everyone but me. And you're too stupid to know that I'm the only person not trying to deceive you. It's very annoying to me. I find it offensive, believe it or not. These effects are easily discernible. If you consider the constitution of rhythm and harmony in themselves, love does not occur in both of his forms in this domain, but the moment you consider in your turn the effects of rhythm and harmony on their audience, either through composition, which creates new verses and melodies, or through musical education, which teaches the correct performance of existing compositions, complications arise directly and they require the treatment of a good practitioner. Ultimately, the identical argument applies once again. The love felt by good people, or by those whom such love might improve, in this regard must be encouraged and protected. This is the honorable heavenly species of love produced by the melodies of Urania, the heavenly muse. The other, produced by Polyhymnia, the muse of many songs, is common and vulgar. Extreme caution is indicated here. We must be careful to enjoy his pleasures without slipping into debauchery. This case, I might add, is strictly paralleled to a serious issue in my own field, namely, the problem of regulating the appetite so as to be able to enjoy a fine meal without unhealthy after effects. In music, therefore, as well as in medicine and in all the other domains, in matters divine as well as in human affairs, we must attend with the greatest possible care to these two species of eros, which are indeed to be found everywhere. Even the seasons of the year exhibit their influence. When the elements to which I have already referred, hot and cold, wet and dry, are animated by the proper species of love, they are in harmony with one another. Their mixture is temperate, and so is the climate. Harvests are plentiful. Men and all other living things are in good health. No harm can come to them. But when the sword of Eros, that is crude and impulsive, controls the seasons, he brings death and destruction. He spreads the plague and many other diseases among plants and animals. He causes frost and hail and blights. And what I'm telling you as we read this is that this was believed, continues to be believed today, and this is what he's talking about is the efficacy of sex cult. When you see people on Twitter say things like the moment before you if you just focus on what you want, it'll manifest for you. Yeah, that's what he just told you. That shit's old as fuck, and it's also wrong. And I don't mean it's an error. I mean it's evil. All these are the effects of the immodest and disordered species of Eros on the movements of the stars and the seasons of the year, that is, on the objects studied by the sciences called astronomy. Consider further the rites of sacrifice and the whole area with which the art of divination is concerned, that is, the interaction between men and gods. Here, too, that should be said theoi, not gods. They're not what you think of. So I'm going to lowercase gods when I read it here. I am going to say theoi. Here, too, Eros is the central concern. Our object is to try to maintain the proper kind of Eros and to attempt to cure the kind that is diseased. For what is the origin of all impiety? Our refusal to gratify the orderly kind of eros, and our deterrence to the other sort, when we should have been guided by the former sort of eros in every action in connection with our parents, living or dead, and with the theoi. The task of divination is to keep watch over these two species of eros and to doctor them as necessary. Divination, therefore, is the practice that produces loving affection between theoi and men. It is simply the science of the effects of eros on justice and piety. Such is the power of love, so varied and great that in all cases it might be called absolute. Yet, even so, it is far greater when love is directed in temperance and justice toward the good, whether in heaven or on earth. Happiness and good fortune, the bonds of human society, concord with the gods above, all these are among his gifts. Perhaps I, too, have omitted a great deal of this discourse on love. If so, I assure you it was quite inadvertent. And if in fact I have overlooked certain points, it is now your task, Aristophanes, to complete the argument, unless, of course, you are planning on a different approach. In any case, proceed. Your hiccups seem cured. Then Aristophanes took over, so Aristodemus said. The hiccups have stopped all right, and not before I applied the sneeze treatment to them. Makes me wonder whether the orderly sort of love in the body calls for the sounds and itchings that constitute a sneeze, because the hiccups stopped immediately when I applied the sneeze treatment. You're good, Aristophanes, Eryximachus answered. But watch, I'm sorry, he doesn't talk like an old-timey guy. Not all of them do. But watch what you're doing. You are making jokes before your speech, and you're forcing me to prepare you to say something funny, and to put up my guard against you. Then otherwise you might speak at peace. Then Aristophanes laughs. Good point, Eryximachus. So let me unsay what I have said. And don't put up your guard. I am worried about saying something funny in my coming oration. That would be pure profit, and it comes with the territory of my muse. What I'm worried about is that I might say something ridiculous. Aristophanes, do you really think you can take a shot at me and then escape? Use your head. Remember, as you speak, that you will be called upon to give an account, though perhaps if I decide to, I'll let you be off. Eryximachus, Aristophanes said. Indeed, I do have in mind a different approach to speaking than the one the two of you used, you and Pausanias. You see, I think people have entirely missed the power of Eros because if they had grasped it, they'd have built the greatest temples and altars to him and made the greatest sacrifices. But as it is, none of this is done for him, though it should be more than anything else. For he loves the human race more than any other god. He stands by us in our troubles, and he cures those ills we humans are most happy to have mended. I shall therefore try to explain his power to you, and you, please, pass my teaching on to everyone else. First, you must learn what human nature was in the beginning and what has happened to it since, because long ago our nature was not what it is now, but very different. There were three kinds of human beings, and that's my point. Not two, as there are now, male and female. In addition to these, there was a third, a combination of those two. Its name survives, though the kind itself has vanished. At that time, you see, the word androgynous really meant something. A form made up of male and female elements, though now there's nothing but the word, and that's used as an insult. My second point is that the shape of each human being was completely round. With back and sides in a circle, they had four hands each, as many legs as hands, and two faces, exactly alike, on a rounded neck. Between the two faces, which were on opposite sides, was one head with four ears. There were two sets of sexual organs, and everything else upright as we do now, whatever direction they wanted. And whenever they set out to run fast, they thrust out their eight limbs, the ones they had, and they spun rapidly, the way gymnasts do cartwheels, by bringing their legs around straight. Now, here is why there were three kinds, and why they were as I described them. The male kind was originally an offspring of the sun, the female of the earth, and the one that combined both genders was an offspring of the moon, because the moon shares in both. Ascend, baby. Wow. Read my fucking Patreon. They were spherical, and so was their motion, because they were like their parents in the sky. In strength and power, therefore, they were terrible, and they had great ambitions. They made an attempt on the gods in Homer's story about Ephialtes and Otus was originally about them, how they tried to make an ascent to heaven so as to attack the gods. Then Zeus and the other gods met in council to discuss what to do, and they were sore perplexed. They couldn't wipe out the human race with thunderbolts and kill them all off, as they had the giants, because that would wipe out the worship they receive along with the sacrifices we humans give them. On the other hand, they couldn't let them run riot. At last, after great effort, Zeus had an idea. I think I have a plan, he said, that would allow human beings to exist and stop their misbehaving. They will give up being wicked when they lose their strength. So I shall now cut each of them in two. At one stroke, they will lose their strength and also become more profitable to us owing to the increase in their number. They shall walk upright on two legs. But if I find they still run riot and do not keep the peace, he said, I will cut them in two again, and they will have to make their way on one leg, hopping. So saying, he cut those human beings in two the way people cut they cut sorb apples before they dry them, or the way they cut eggs with hairs. Hmm. As he cut each one, he commanded Apollo to turn its face and half its neck towards the wound, so that each person would see that he'd cut and kept better order. Uh, so that each person would see that he'd been cut and kept better order. Then Zeus commanded Apollo to heal the rest of the wound, and Apollo did turn the face around, and he drew skin from all sides over what is now called the stomach, and there he made one mouth as in a pouch with a drawstring, and fastened at the center of the stomach. This is now called the navel. Then he smoothed out the other wrinkles, of which were many, and he shaped the breast, using some such tool as shoemakers have for smoothing wrinkles out of leather on the form. But he left a few wrinkles around the stomach and the navel, so to be a reminder of what happened long ago. Now, since their natural form had been cut in two, each one longed for its own other half, and so they would throw their arms about each other, weaving themselves together, wanting to grow together. In that condition, they would die from hunger and general idleness, because they would do nothing apart from each other. Whenever one of the halves died and one was left, the one that was left still sought another and wove itself together with that. Sometimes the half he met came from a woman, as we'd call her now, sometimes it came from a man. Either way, they kept on dying. Then, however, Zeus took pity on them and came up with another plan. He moved their genitals around to the front. Before then, you see, they used to have their genitals outside like their faces, and they cast seed and made children not in one another but on the ground like cicadas. So Zeus brought about this relocation of genitals, and in so doing, he invented superior reproduction by the man in the woman. The purpose of this was so that when a man embraced a woman, he would cast his seed and they would have children. But when male embraced male, they would at least have the satisfaction of intercourse, after which they could stop embracing, returning to their jobs, and look after their own needs in life. This, then, is the source of our desire to love each other. Eros is born into every human being. It calls back the halves of our original nature together. It tries to make one out of two and to heal the wound of human nature. Each of us, then, is a matching half of a human whole, because each was sliced like a flat fish, two out of one, and each of us is always seeking the half that matches him. That's why a man who is split from the double sort, which used to be called androgynous, runs after women. Many lecherous men have come from that class, and so do the lecherous women who run after men. Women who are split from a woman, however, pay no attention at all to men. They are oriented towards women, and lesbians come from this class. People who are split from a male are male oriented. While they are boys, because they are chips off the male block, they love men and enjoy lying with men and being embraced by men. Those are the best of boys and lads, because they are the most manly in their nature. Of course, some say such boys are shameless, but they're lying. It's not because they have no shame that such boys do this, you see, but because they are bold and brave and masculine, and they tend to cherish what is like themselves. Do you want me to prove it? Look, these are the only kinds of boys who grow up to be real men in politics. When they're grown men, they are lovers of young men, and they naturally pay no attention to marriage or to making babies, except in so far as they are required by local custom. They, however, are quite satisfied to live their lives with one another unmarried. In every way, then, this sort of man grows up as a lover of young men and a lover of Eros, always rejoicing in his own kind. And so, when a person meets the half that is his very own, whatever his orientation, whether it's to young men or not, then something wonderful happens. The two are struck from their senses by love, by a sense of belonging to one another, and by desire, and they don't want to be separated from one another, not even for a moment. These are the people who finish out their lives together and still cannot say what it is they want from one another. No one would think it is the intimacy of sex, that mere sex is the reason each lover takes so great and deep a joy in being with the other. It's obvious that the soul of every lover longs for something else. His soul cannot say what it is, but like an oracle, it has a sense of what it wants, and like an oracle, it hides behind a riddle. Suppose two lovers are lying together, and Hephaestus stands over them with his mending tools, asking, what is it you human beings really want from each other? And suppose they're perplexed, and he asks them again, Is this your heart's desire, then, for the two of you to become parts of the same whole, as near as can be, and never to separate day or night? Because if that's your desire, I'd like to weld you together and join you into one. Then the two of you would share one life as long as you lived, because you would be one being. And by the same token, when you died, you would be one and not two in Hades, having died a single death. Look at your love and see if this is what you desire. Wouldn't this be all the good fortune you could want? Surely you can see that no one who receives such an offer would turn it down. No one would find anything else that he wanted. Yeah, no. Instead, everyone would think he'd found out at last what he had always wanted, to come together and melt together with the one he loves, so that one person emerged from two. Why should this be so? It's because, as I said, we used to be complete wholes in our original nature, and now Eros is the name of our pursuit of wholeness, for our desire to be complete. Long ago we were united, as I said, but now the God has divided us as the punishment for the wrong we did him, just as the Spartans divided the Acadians. So there's a danger that if we don't keep order before the gods, we'll be split in two again, and then we'll be walking around in the condition of people carved on gravestones in bas relief, sawn apart between the nostrils like half dice. We can encourage all men, therefore, to treat the gods with all due reverence, so that we may escape this fate and find wholeness instead. And we will, if Eros is our guide and our commander. Let no one work against him. Whoever opposes Eros is hateful to the gods. But if we become friends of the god and cease to quarrel with him, then we shall find the younger men that are meant for us, and win their love, as very few men do nowadays. Now, don't get ideas, Eryximachus, and turn this speech into a comedy. Don't think I'm pointing this at Pausanias and Agathon. Probably they both do belong to the group that are entirely masculine in nature, but I am speaking about everyone, men and women alike, and I say there's just one way for the human race to flourish. We must bring love to its perfect conclusion, and each of us must win the favors of this very young, of his very own young man, so that we can recover his original nature. If that is the ideal, then of course the nearest approach to it is best in present circumstances, and that is to win the favor of young men who are naturally sympathetic to us. Now, hear that. Hear what he just said. He said, your best route to a healthy relationship is to fall in love with yourself as a preteen again. Holy fuck, where have you heard that before? If this is the ideal, then of course the nearest approach to it is best in present circumstances, and that is to win the favor of young men who are naturally sympathetic to us. If we are to give due praise to the God who can give us this blessing, then we must praise Eros. Eros does the best that can be done for the time being. He draws us towards what belongs to us, but for the future, love promises the greatest hope of all. If we treat the gods with due reverence, he will restore to us our original nature, and by healing us, he will make us blessed and happy. That, he said, is my speech about Eros, Eryximachus. It is rather different from yours. As I begged you earlier, don't make me a comedy of it. I'd prefer to hear what all the others will say, or rather, what each of them will say, since Agathon and Socrates are the only ones left. I found your speech delightful, said Eryximachus, so I'll do as you say. Really, we've had such a rich feast of speeches on love that if I couldn't vouch for the fact that Socrates and Agathon are masters of the art of love, I'd be afraid that they'd have nothing left to say. But as it is, I have no fears on this score. Then Socrates said, that's because you did beautifully in this contest, Eryximachus, but if you ever get in my position, or rather the position I'll be in after Agathon's spoken so well, then you'll really be afraid. You'll be at your wits' end, as I am now. You're trying to bewitch me, Socrates, said Agathon, by making me think the audience speaks great things of my speech, so I'll get flustered. Agathon, said Socrates, how forgetful do you think I am? I saw how brave and dignified you were when you walked right up to the theater platform along with the actors and looked straight out at that enormous audience. You were about to put your own writing on display, and you weren't the least bit panicked. After seeing that, how could I expect you to be flustered by us when we are so few? Why, Socrates, said Agathon, you must think I have nothing but theater audiences on my mind. So you suppose I don't realize that, if you're intelligent, You find a few sensible men much more frightening than a senseless crowd? No, Socrates said. It wouldn't be very handsome of me to think you crude in any way, Agathon. I'm sure that if you ever run into people you consider wise, you'll pay more attention to them than to ordinary people. But you can't suppose we're in that class. We're in that class. We were at the theater too, part of the ordinary crowd. Still, if you did run into any wise men other than yourself, you'd certainly be ashamed at the thought of doing anything ugly in front of them. Is that what you mean? That's true, he said. On the other hand, you wouldn't be ashamed to do something ugly in front of ordinary people. Is that it? At that point, Phaedrus interrupted. Agathon, my friend, if you answer Socrates, he'll no longer care whether we get anywhere with what we're doing here so long as he has a partner for discussion, especially if he's handsome. Now, like you, I enjoy listening to Socrates in discussion, but it is my duty to see to the praising of Eros and to exact a speech from every one of this group. When each of you two has made his offering to the god, then you can have your discussion. You're doing a beautiful job, Phaedrus, said Agathon. There's nothing to keep me from giving my speech. Socrates will have many opportunities for discussion later. I wish first to speak of how I ought to speak, and only then to speak. In my opinion, you see, all those who have spoken before me did not so much celebrate the god as congratulate human beings on the good things that come to them from the god. But who is it who gave these gifts? What he is like? No one has spoken about that. Now, only one method is correct for every praise, no matter whose. You must explain what qualities in the subject of your speech enable him to give the benefits for which we praise him. So now, in the case of Eros, it is right for us to praise him first for what he is and afterwards for his gifts. I maintain, then, that while all the gods are happy, Eros, if I may say so without giving offense, is the happiest of them all, for he is the most beautiful and the best. His great beauty lies in this. First, Phaedrus, he is the youngest of the gods. He proves my point himself by fleeing old age in headlong flight, fast moving though it is. That's obvious. It comes after us faster than it should. Love was born to hate old age and will come nowhere near it. Love always lives with young people and is one of them. The old story holds good that like is always drawn to like, and though on many other points I agree with Phaedrus, I do not agree with this, that love is more ancient than Kronos and Iapetus. No, I say that he is the youngest of the gods and stays young forever. Those old stories, Hesiod and Parmenides, tell about the gods, those things that happened under necessity, not love, if what they say is true. For not one of all those violent deeds would have been done, no castrations, no imprisonments, if love had been present among them. There would have been peace and brotherhood instead, as there has been now, as long as love has been king of the gods. So he is young. And besides being young, he is delicate. He takes a poet as good as Homer. It takes a poet as good as Homer to show how delicate the god is, for Homer says that mischief is a god and that she is delicate. Well, that her feet are delicate anyway. He says, hers are delicate feet, not on the ground. Does she draw nigh? She walks instead upon the heads of men. As lovely proof, I think, to show how delicate she is. She doesn't walk on anything hard. She walks only on what is soft. We shall use the same proof about love, then, to show that he is delicate. For he walks not on earth, not even on people's skulls, which are not really soft at all, but in the softest of all the things that are. There he walks, there he has his home, for he makes his home in the characters, in the souls of gods and men, and not even in every soul that comes along. When he encounters a soul with a harsh character, he turns away. But when he finds a soft and gentle character, he settles down in it always. Then he is touching with his feet and with the whole of himself what is softest in the softest places. He must therefore be most delicate. This was turned into Jesus. The Jesus lives in your heart, right there. He is youngest then, and most delicate. In addition, he has a fluid, supple shape. For if he were hard, he would not be able to enfold a soul completely or escape notice when he first entered it or withdrew. Besides, his graceful good looks prove that he is balanced and fluid in his nature. Everyone knows that Eros has extraordinary good looks, and between ugliness and Eros there is unceasing war. And the exquisite coloring of his skin, the way the god consorts with flowers, shows that, for he never settles in anything, be it a body or a soul, that cannot flower or has lost its bloom. His place is wherever it is flowery and fragrant. There he settles, there he stays. Enough for now about the beauty of the god, though much remains still to be said. After this, we should speak of love's moral character. The main point is that love is neither the cause nor the victim of any injustice. He does no wrong to gods or men, nor they to him. If anything has an effect on him, it is never by violence, for violence never touches love, and the effects he has on others are not forced. For every service we give to love, we give willingly, and whatever one person agrees on with another, when both are willing, that is right and just. So say the laws that are kings of society. And besides justice, he has the biggest share of moderation, for moderation by common agreement is power over pleasures and passions, and no pleasure is more powerful than Eros. But if they are weaker, they are under the power of Eros, and he has the power. And because he has power over pleasures and passions, Eros is exceptionally moderate. And as for manly bravery, not even Ares can stand up to Eros. For Ares had no hold on Eros, but Eros does on Ares. Love of Aphrodite. So runs the tale. But he who has hold is no more powerful than he who is held, and so, because love has power over the bravest of the others, he is bravest of them all. Now, I have spoken about the god's justice, moderation, and bravery. His wisdom remains. I must try not to leave out anything that can be said on this. In the first place, to honor our profession as Eryximachus did his. The god is so skilled a poet that he can make others into poets. Once Eros touches him, anyone can be a poet. However uncultured he had been before. This, we may fittingly observe, testifies that Eros is a good poet, good in some, at every kind of artistic production. For you can't give to another what you don't have yourself, and you can't teach what you don't know. And as to the production of animals, who will deny that they are all born and begotten through Eros's skill? And as for artisans and professionals, don't we know that whoever has this god for a teacher ends up in the light of fame, while a man untouched by Eros ends in obscurity? Apollo, for one, invented archery, medicine, and prophecy when desire and love showed the way. Even he, therefore, would be a pupil of Eros, and so would the Muses in music, Hephaestus in bronze work, Athena in weaving, and Zeus in the governance of gods and men. That too is how the gods' quarrels were settled once love came to be among them. Love of beauty, obviously, because love is not drawn to ugliness. Before that, as I said in the beginning, and as the poets say, many dreadful things happened among the gods because necessity was king. But once this god was born, all goods came to gods and men alike through love of beauty. This is how I think of love, Phaedrus. First, he is himself the most beautiful and the best. After that, if anyone else is at all like that, Eros is responsible. I am suddenly struck by a need to say something in poetic meter, that it is he who gives peace to men and stillness to the sea, lays winds to rest and careworn men to sleep. Love fills us with togetherness and drains all of our divisiveness away. Love calls gatherings like these together in feasts, in dances, and in ceremonies. He gives the lead. Love moves us to mildness, removes us from wildness. He is giver of kindness, never of meanness, gracious, kindly. Let wise men see and gods admire. Treasure to lovers, envy to others. Father of elegance, luxury, delicacy, grace, yearning, desire. Love cares well for good men, cares not for bad ones. In pain, in fear, in desire, our speech. Love is our best guide and guard. He is our comrade and our Savior, ornament of all gods and men, most beautiful leader and the best. Every man should follow Eros, sing beautifully his hymns, and join with him in the songs he sings that charm the mind of Theoi or man. This, Phaedrus, is the speech I have to offer. Let it be dedicated to the god, part of it in fun, part of it moderately serious, as best as I could manage. When Agathon finished, Aristodemus said, everyone there burst into applause. So, becoming to himself and to the god, did they think the young man's speech. Then Socrates glanced at Eryximachus and said, now do you think I was foolish? I'm sorry, this is Socrates speaking. Now do you think I was foolish to feel the fear I felt before? Didn't I speak like a prophet? When ago I said that Agathon would give an amazing speech and I would be tongue-tied. You were prophetic about one thing, I think, said Eryximachus, that Agathon would speak well, but you tongue-tied? No, I don't believe that. Bless you, said Socrates. How am I not going to be tongue-tied? I or anyone else after a speech delivered with such beauty and variety. The other parts may not have been so wonderful, but that at the end. Who would not be struck dumb on hearing the beauty of the words and phrases? And I emphatically agree. Anyway, I was worried that I'd not be able to say anything that came close to them in beauty, and so I would almost have run away and escaped if there had been a place to go. And, you see, the speech reminded me of Gorgias, so that I actually experienced what Homer describes. I was afraid that Agathon would end by sending the Gorgian head. Awesome at speaking in a speech against my speech, and that this would turn me to stone by striking me dumb. Then I realized how ridiculous I'd been to agree to join you in praising love and to say that I was master of the art of love, when I knew nothing whatever of this business, of how anything whatever ought to be praised. In my foolishness, I thought you should tell the truth about whatever you praise, that this should be your basis, and that, from this, a speaker should select the most beautiful truths and arrange them most suitably. I was quite vain, thinking that I would talk well and that I knew the truth about praising anything whatever. But now it appears that this is not what it is to praise anything whatever. Rather, it is to apply to the object the grandest and the most beautiful qualities, whether he actually has them or not. And if they are false, that it is no objection, for the proposal apparently was that everyone here make the rest of us think he is praising Eros, and not that he actually praised him. I think that is why you stir up every word and apply it to Eros. Your description of him and his gifts is designed to make him look better and more beautiful than anything else. To ignorant listeners, plainly, for of course he wouldn't look like that way to those who knew. And your praise did seem beautiful and respectful. But I didn't even know the method for giving praise, and it was in ignorance that I agreed to take part in this. So, the tongue promised and the mind did not. Goodbye to that. I'm not giving another eulogy using this method, not at all. I wouldn't be able to do it. But if you wish, I'd like to tell the truth my way. I want to avoid any comparison with your speeches, so as not to give you a reason to laugh at me. So look, Phaedrus, would a speech like this satisfy your requirement? You will hear the truth about love, and the words and phrasing will take care of themselves. Then Aristodemus said that Phaedrus and the others urged him to speak in the way he thought was required, whatever it was. Well then, Phaedrus, said Socrates, allow me to ask Agathon a few little questions, so that, once I have his agreement, I may speak on that basis. You have my permission, said Phaedrus. Ask away. After that, said Aristodemus, Aristodemus is probably how that should be pronounced. Aristodemus, Socrates began, indeed, Agathon, my friend, I thought you led the way beautifully with your speech when you said that one should first show the qualities of love himself, and only then those of his deeds. I must admire that beginning. Come, then, since you have beautifully and magnificently expounded his qualities in other ways, tell me this too about love. Is Eros such as to be a love of something or of nothing? I'm not asking if he is born of some mother or father, for the question whether Eros is love of mother or of father would really be ridiculous. But it's as if I'm asking this about a father, whether a father is the father of something or not. You'd tell me, of course, if you wanted to give me a good answer, that it's of a son or a daughter, that a father is the father, wouldn't you? Certainly, said Agathon. Then does the same go for the mother? He agreed to that also. Well then, said Socrates, answer a little more fully, and you will understand better what I want. If I should ask, what about this, a brother, just in so far as he is a brother, is he the brother of something or not? He said that he was. And he's of a brother or a sister, isn't he? He agreed. Now, try to tell me about love. He said, is Eros the love of nothing or of something? Of something, surely. Then keep this object of love in mind and remember what it is. But tell me this much: does Eros desire that of which it is love? The love? Does Eros desire that of which it is the love, or not? Certainly, he said. At the time he desires and loves something, does he actually have what he desires and loves at that time, or doesn't he? He doesn't. At least that wouldn't be likely, he said. Instead of what's likely, said Socrates, ask yourself whether it's necessary that this be true. A thing that desires something of which it is in need. Otherwise, if it were not in need, it would not desire it. I can't tell you, Agathon, how strongly it strikes me that this is necessary. How about you? I think so too. Good. Now then, would someone who is tall want to be tall, or someone who is strong want to be strong? Impossible on the basis of what we'd have agreed, presumably because no one is in need of the things he already has. True. But maybe a strong man could want to be strong, says Socrates, or a fast one fast, or a healthy one healthy. In cases like this, you might think people really do want to be things they already are, and do want to have qualities they already have. I bring them up so they won't deceive us. But in these cases, Agathon, if you stop to think about them, you will see that these people are what they are at the present time, whether they want to be or not, by a logical necessity. And who, may I ask, would ever bother to desire what's necessary in any event? But when someone says, I am healthy, but that's just what I want to be, or I am rich, but that's just what I want to be, or I desire the very things that I have, let us say to him, you already have riches and health and strength in your possession, my man. What you want is to possess these things in time to come, since in the present, whether you want to or not, you have them. Whenever you say, I desire what I already have, ask yourself whether you don't mean this: I want the things I have now to be mine in the future as well. Wouldn't he agree? According to Aristodemus, Agathon said that he would. So Socrates said, then this is what it is to love something which is not at hand, which the lover does not have. It is to desire the preservation of what he now has in time to come, so that he will have it then. Quite so. So such a man, or anyone else who has a desire, desires what is not at hand and not present, what he does not have and what he is not, and that of which he is in need. For such are the objects of desire and love. Certainly, he said. Come then, said Socrates, let us review the points on which we've agreed. Aren't they, first, that love is the love of something, and second, that he loves things of which he has a present need? Yes, he said. Now, remember, in addition to these points, what you said in your speech about what it is that love loves. If you like, I'll remind you. I think you said something like this, that the gods' quarrels were settled by love of different things, for there is no love of ugly things. I'm sorry. The gods' quarrels were settled by love of beautiful things, for there is no love of ugly ones. Didn't you say something like that? I did, said Agathon. And that's a suitable thing to say, my friend, said Socrates. But if this is so, wouldn't love have to be a desire for beauty and never for ugliness? He agreed. And we also agree that he loves just what he needs and does not have. Are you starting to notice body image language in this? Yes. So love needs beauty then, and does not have it. Necessarily, he said. So, if something needs beauty and has got no beauty at all, would you say that it's still beautiful? Certainly not. Then do you still agree that love is beautiful? If those things are so? Then Agathon said, it turns out, Socrates, I didn't know what I was talking about in that speech. It was a beautiful speech anyway, Agathon. Now, take it a little further. Don't you think that good things are always beautiful as well? I do. Then if love needs beautiful things, and if all good things are beautiful, he, Eros, will need good things too. As for me, Socrates, he said, I am unable to contradict you. Let it be as you say. Then is the truth, my beloved Agathon, that you are unable to contradict. It's not hard at all to contradict Socrates. Now I'll let you go. I shall try to go through for you the speech about Eros I once heard from a woman of Mantinea Diotima, a woman who is wise about many things besides this. Once she even put off the plague for 10 years by telling the Athenians what sacrifices to make. She is the one who taught me the art of love, and I shall go through her speech as best I can on my own, using what Agathon and I have agreed to as a basis. Okay, this is important. You don't know me, not really. But do you notice a pattern in my behavior and Socrates' behavior? When Socrates starts to talk about women's things, he doesn't just form baseless opinions. What he does is discount your opinion because you're a male and then tell you the opinion of a female. Now, and then he can argue with her. Also, this art of love stuff, you need to understand that sex wasn't bump and run. You taught your partner what you liked. I just don't understand how everything since the millennials hit adulthood is so wrong, just so stupid. I understand it's because Gen X is just mentally and spiritually retarded. But really, how did none of you look around? None of you in my age group, how did none of you look around and think, I could be better than this? None of you learned from any of your relationships that you've had. None. Following your lead, Agathon, one should first describe who love is and what he is like, and afterwise describe his works. I think it will be easiest for me to proceed the way Diotima did and tell you how she questioned me. You see, I have told her, I had told her almost the same things Agathon told me just now, that Eros is a great god and that he belongs to beautiful things. Also, notice this. Men got sex, long-term sex and sexual partnership from women by telling them their opinions of Cupid. Idiot women today. Just idiot women today. You're just so dumb. You don't even interview him on what commitment and love and marriage even means. You just make it a sin to bring them up. Stupid. It's just stupid. That love is a great God and that he belongs to beautiful things. And she used the very same argument against me that I used against Agathon. She showed how, according to my very own speech, love is neither beautiful nor good. Lust is neither beautiful nor good. Carnal passion, the carnal drive to put a baby inside a woman, to orally or anally fuck her, to squeeze her tits and then never talk to her again. There's nothing beautiful in that. It's ugly, horrible. It leaves her feeling terrible, and it leaves you feeling ugly. So I said, "What do you mean, Diotima? Is love ugly then and bad?" But she said, "Watch your tongue. Do you really think that if a thing is not beautiful, it is so ugly? It has to be ugly?" "I certainly do." "And if a thing not wise, it's ignorant. Or haven't you found yet that there's something in between wisdom and ignorance?" "What's that?" "It's judging things correctly without being able to give a reason. Surely you see that this is not the same as knowing, for how could knowledge be unreasoning? And it's not ignorance either. For how could what hits the truth be ignorance? Correct judgment, of course, has this character. It is in between understanding and ignorance." "True," said I, "as you say." "Then don't force whatever is not beautiful to be ugly, or whatever is not good to be bad. It's the same with love. When you agree he is neither good nor beautiful, you need not think he is ugly and bad. He could be something in between," she said. Yeah, Christopher Columbus could be something in between. He could be something in between the statue and the reality. Idiots. Idiots. "True," said I, "as you say." "Then don't force whatever is not beautiful to be ugly, or whatever is not good to be bad. It's the same with love. When you agree he is neither good nor beautiful, you need not think he is ugly and bad. He could be something in between. Yet everyone agrees he is a great god," I said. "Only those who don't know," she says. "Is that how you mean everyone? Or do you include those who do know?" "Oh, everyone altogether." And she laughed at me. "Socrates, how could those who say that he's not a god at all agree that he's a great god?" Who said that?" I asked. "You, for one," she said, "and I for another." "Well, how can you say this?" I exclaimed. "That's easy. Tell me, wouldn't you say that all gods are beautiful and happy? Surely you'd never say a god is not beautiful or happy." "Zeus, not I said. "Well, by calling anyone happy, don't you mean they possess good and beautiful things?" "Certainly." "What about love? You agreed he needs good and beautiful things, and that's why he desires them, because he needs them." "I certainly did." "Then how could he be a god if he has no share in good and beautiful things?" "There's no way he could, apparently." "Now do you see? You don't believe love is a god either." "Then what could Eros be?" I asked. A mortal?" "Certainly not." "Then what is he?" "He's like what we mentioned before," she said. "He is an in-between, mortal and immortal." "What do you mean, Diotima?" "He's a great spirit, Socrates. Everything spiritual, you see, is in between God and mortal." "What is their function?" I asked. "They are messengers who shuttle back and forth between the two, conveying prayer and sacrifice from men to gods, while to men they bring commands from the gods and gifts in return for sacrifices. Being in the middle of the two, they round out the whole and bind fast the all to all. Throughout them, all divination passes. Through them, the art of priests and sacrifice and ritual and enchantment, prophecy, and sorcery. Gods do not mix with men. They mingle and converse with us through spirits instead, whether we are awake or asleep. He who is wise in any of these ways is a man of the spirit, but he who is wise in any other way, in a profession or any manual work, is merely a mechanic. These spirits are many and various, and one of them is Eros." "Who is my father and who are my father and mother?" I asked. "That's rather a long story," she said. "I'll tell it to you, all the same. When Aphrodite was born, the gods held a celebration. Poros, the son of Metis, was there among them. When they had feasted, Pania came begging. As poverty does when there's a party, and stayed by the gates. Now Poros got drunk on nectar There was no wine yet, you see, and, feeling drowsy, went into the garden with Zeus, where he fell asleep. Then Peneus schemed up a plan to relieve her lack of resources. She would get a child from Poros. So she lay beside him and got pregnant with Eros. That is why Eros was born, to follow Aphrodite and serve her, because he was conceived on the day of her birth. And that's why he is also by nature a lover of beauty, because Aphrodite herself is especially beautiful. As the son of Poros and Penea, his lot in life is set to be like hers. In the first place, he is always poor, and he's far from being delicate and beautiful as ordinary people think he is. Instead, he is tough and shriveled and shoeless and homeless, always lying on the dirt without a bed, sleeping on people's doorsteps and in roadsides under the sky, having his mother's nature, always living with need, capitalized, the god need. But on his father's side, he is a schemer. After the beautiful and the good, he is brave, impetuous, and intense, an awesome hunter, always weaving snares, resourceful in his pursuit of intelligence, a lover of wisdom through all of his life, a genius with enchantments, potions, and clever pleadings. He is by nature neither immortal nor mortal, but now he springs to life when he gets his way, now he dies, all on the very same day, because he is his father's son. However, he keeps coming back to life, but then everything he finds his way to always slip away. For this reason, Eros. For this reason, Eros is never completely without resources, nor is he ever rich. You see Jesus in this, right? Like, I'm not stupid, right? You see Jesus in this, right? You see why I am the way I am, right? He is in between wisdom and ignorance as well. In fact, you see, none of the gods loves wisdom or wants to become wise, for they are wise, and no one else who is wise already loves wisdom. On the other hand, no one who is ignorant will love wisdom either, or want to become wise. For what's especially difficult about being ignorant is that you are content with yourself, even though you're neither beautiful and good nor intelligent. If you don't think you need anything, of course you don't want what you don't think you need. In that case, Diotima, who are the people who love wisdom if they are neither wise nor ignorant? That's obvious. A child could tell you. Those who love wisdom fall in between those two extremes, and Eros is one of them because he is in love with what is beautiful, and wisdom is extremely beautiful. It follows that love must be a lover of wisdom, and as such is in between being wise and being ignorant. This too comes to him from his parentage, from a father who is wise and resourceful, and a mother who is not wise and lacks resource. My dear Socrates, that then is the nature of the spirit called love. Considering that you thought about Eros, it's no surprise that you were led into thinking of love as you did. On the basis of what you say, I conclude that you thought Eros was being loved rather than being a lover. I think that's why Eros struck you as beautiful in every way, because it is what is really beautiful and graceful that deserves to be loved, and this is perfect and highly blessed. But being a lover takes a different form, which I have just described. So I said, "All right then, my friend. What you say about love is beautiful, but if you are right, what use is love to human beings?" I'll try to teach you that, Socrates, after I finish this. So far, I've begun explaining the character and the parentage of Eros. Now, according to you, he is loved for different things. And suppose someone asks us, Socrates and Diotima, what is the point of loving beautiful things? It's clearer this way. The lover of beautiful things has a desire. What does he desire? That they become his own, I say. But that answer calls for still another question. That is, what will this man have when the beautiful things he wants have become his own? I said there was no way I could have a ready answer to that question. Then she said, suppose someone changes the question, putting good in place of beautiful, and asks you this. Tell me, Socrates, a lover of good things, has a desire. What does he desire? That they become his own, I said. And what will he have when the good things he wants have become his own? This time it's easier to come up with the answer. He'll have happiness. That's what makes happy people happy, isn't it? Possessing good things. There's no need to ask further. What's the point of wanting happiness? The answer you gave seems to me final. True. Now, this desire for happiness, this kind of love, do you think it is common to all human beings and that everyone wants to have good things forever and ever? What would you say? Just that, I said. It is common to all. Just that. Then, Socrates, why don't we say that everyone is in love? She asked. Since everyone always loves the same things. Instead, we say some people are in love and others not. Why is that? I wonder about that myself. It's nothing to wonder about. It's because we divide out a special kind of love and we refer to it by the word that means the whole love. And for the other kinds of love, we use other words. What do you mean? Well, you know, for example, that poetry has a very wide range. After all, everything that is responsible for creating something out of nothing is a kind of poetry. And so all the creations of every craft and profession are themselves a kind of poetry, and everyone who practices a craft is a poet. True. Nevertheless, she said, as you also know, these craftsmen are not called poets. We have other words for them, and out of the whole of poetry we have marked off one part, the part that muses give us with melody and rhythm, and we refer to this as the word that means the whole. For this alone is called poetry, and those who practice this art of poetry are called poets. True. That also is how it is with love. The main point is this: every desire for good things is for or for happiness is the supreme and treacherous love in everyone. But those who pursue this along any of its many other ways, through making money, or through the sport of love, the love of sports, or through philosophy, we don't say that these people are in love, and we don't call them lovers. It's only when people are devoted exclusively to one special kind of love that we use these words that really belong to the whole of it: love, and in love, and lovers. I am beginning to see your point. Now, there is a certain story according to which lovers are the people who speak their there is a certain story to which lovers are those people who seek their other halves. But according to my story, a lover does not seek the half of the whole unless my friend it turns out to be good as well. I say this because people are even willing to cut off their own arms and legs if they think they are diseased. I don't think an individual takes joy in what belongs to him personally unless by belonging to me he means good, and by belonging to another he means bad. That's because what everyone loves is really nothing other than the good. Do you disagree? Zeus, not I. Now then, can we simply say that people love the good? Yes. But shouldn't we add that we, in loving it, they want the good? I'm sorry. But shouldn't we add that, in loving it, they want the good to be theirs? We should. And not only that, they want the good to be theirs forever, don't they? We should add to that too. In a word, then, love is wanting to possess the good forever. That's very true, I said. This, then, is the object of love. Now, how do lovers pursue it? We'd rightly say that when they are in love, they are doing something with eagerness and zeal, and what it is precisely that they do. Can they say? If I could, I said, I wouldn't be your student, filled with the admiration for your wisdom and trying to learn these very things. Well, I'll tell you. If it giveth birth in beauty, whether in body or in soul. It would take divination to figure out what you mean. I cannot. Well, I'll tell you more clearly. All of us are pregnant, Socrates, both in body and in soul, and as soon as we come to a certain age, we naturally desire to give birth. Now, no one can possibly give birth in anything ugly, only in something beautiful. That's because when a man and a woman come together in order to give birth, this is a godly affair. Pregnancy, reproduction, this is an immortal thing for a mortal animal to do, and it cannot occur in anything that is out of harmony. But ugliness is out of harmony with all that is godly. Beauty, however, is in harmony with the divine. Therefore, the goddess who presides at childbirth, she's called Moira, or Alitu, or Ailituea, Tuia, Ailituia, is really beauty. That's why, whenever pregnant animals or persons draw near to beauty, they become gentle and joyfully disposed and give birth and reproduce. But near ugliness they are foul faced and draw back in pain. They turn away and shrink back and do not reproduce. And because they hold on to what they carry inside them, the labor is painful. This is the source of the great excitement about beauty that comes to anyone who is pregnant and always teeming with life. Beauty releases them from their great pain. You see, Socrates, she said, what Eros wants is not beauty, as you think it is. Well, what is it then? Reproduction and birth in beauty. Maybe, I said. Certainly. Now, why reproduction? It's because reproduction goes on forever. It is what mortals have in place of immortality. A lover must desire immortality along with the good. If what we agreed earlier was right, that a love wants to possess the good forever, it follows from our argument that the love must desire immortality. All of this she taught me on those occasions when she spoke on the art of love. And once she asked, what do you think causes love and desire, Socrates? Don't you see what an awful state a wild animal is in when it wants to reproduce? Footed and winged animals alike are all plagued by the disease of love. First they are sick for intercourse with each other, then for nurturing their young. For their sake the weakest animals stand ready to do battle against the strongest and even to die for them, and they may be racked with famine in order to feed their young, but they would do anything for their sake. Human beings, you'd think, would do this because they understand the reason for it, but what causes wild animals to be in such a state of love? Can you say? And I said again that I didn't know. So she said, how do you think you'll ever master the art of love if you don't know that? But that's why I came to you, Diotima, as I just said. I knew I needed a teacher. So tell me what causes this and everything else that belongs to the art of love. If you really believe that love, by its nature, aims at what we have often agreed it is, then don't be surprised at the answer. For among animals, the principle is the same as with us, and mortal nature seeks so far as possible to live forever and be immortal. And this is possible in one way only, by reproduction, because it always leaves behind a new young one in place of the old. Even while each living thing is said to be alive and to be the same, as a person is said to be the same from childhood till he turns into an old man, even then he never consists of the same things, though he is called the same, but he is always being renewed and in other respects passing away in his hair and flesh and bones and blood and his entire body. But it's not just in his body, but in his soul too, for none of this matters, for none of his manners, customs, opinions, desires, pleasures, pains, or fears ever remain the same, but some are coming to be in him while others are passing away. And what is still far stranger than that is not only does one branch of knowledge come to be in us, while another passes away, and that we are never the same even in respect of our knowledge, but that each single piece of knowledge has the same fate. For what we call studying exists because knowledge is leaving us, because forgetting is the departure of knowledge, while studying puts a fresh memory in place of what went away. Therefore, preserving a piece of knowledge so that it seems to be the same. And in that way, everything mortal is preserved, not like the divine, but always being the same in every way, but because what is departing and aging leaves behind something new, something such as had something such as it had been. By this device, Socrates, what is mortal shares in immortality, whether it is a body or anything else, while the immortal has another way. So don't be surprised if everything naturally values its own offspring, because it is for the sake of immortality that everything shows this zeal, which is eros. Yet when I heard her speech, I was amazed and spoke, "Well, most wise Diotima, is this really the way it is?" And in the manner, oh, I'm sorry, and in the manner of a perfect sophist, she says, "Be sure of it, Socrates. Look, if you will, at how human beings, they're ready to brave any danger for the sake of this much more than they are for their children, and they are prepared to spend money, suffer through all sorts of ordeals, and even die for the sake of glory. Do you really think that Alcestis would have died for Admetus?" she asked, "or that Achilles would have died for Patroclus, or that Eurycodorus would have died so as to preserve the throne of his sons, if they hadn't expected the memory of their virtue, which we still hold in honor, to be immortal? Far from it," she said. "I believe that anyone would do anything for the sake of immortal virtue, and that the glorious fame that follows. And the better the people, the more they will do, for they are all in love with immortality. Now, some people are pregnant in body, and for this reason turn more to women and pursue love in that way, providing themselves through childbirth with immortality and remembrance and happiness as they think for all time to come, while others are pregnant in soul, because there surely are those who are even more pregnant in their souls than in their bodies, and these are pregnant with what is fitting for a soul to bear and bring to earth. And what is fitting? Wisdom, and the rest of virtue, which all poets beget, as well as the craftsmen who are said to be creative, but by far the greatest and most beautiful part of wisdom deals with the proper ordering of cities and households, and that is called moderation and justice. When someone has been pregnant with these in the soul from early youth, while he is still a virgin, and having arrived at the proper age, desires to beget and give birth, he too will certainly go about seeking the beauty in which we should beget, for he will never beget in anything ugly. Since he is pregnant, then he is much more drawn to bodies that are beautiful than to those that are ugly. And if he also has the luck to find a soul that is beautiful and noble and well informed, he is even more drawn to this combination. Such a man makes him instantly teem with ideas and arguments about virtue, the qualities a virtuous man should have, and the customary activities in which he should engage, and so he tries to educate him. In my view, you see, when he makes contact with someone beautiful and keeps company with him, he receives and gives birth to what he has been carrying inside him for ages. And whether they are together or apart, he remembers that beauty. And in common with him, he nurtures the newborn. Such people, therefore, have much more to share than do the parents of human children, and have a firmer bond of friendship, because the children in whom they have a share are more beautiful and more immortal. Everyone would rather have such children than human ones, and would look up to Homer, Hesiod, and the other good poets with envy and admiration for the offspring they have left, offspring which because they are immortal themselves, provide their parents with immortal glory and remembrance. For example, those are the sort of children Lycurgus left behind in Sparta as the saviors of Sparta and virtually all of Greece. Among you, the honor goes to Solon for his creation of your laws. Other men in other places, everywhere, Greek or barbarian, have brought a host of beautiful deeds into the light and begotten every kind of virtue. Already many shrines have sprung up to honor them with their immortal children, which hasn't happened yet to anyone for human offspring. Even you, Socrates, could probably come to be initiated into these rites of love. But as for the purposes of these rites, when they are done correctly, that is the final and highest mystery, and I don't know if you are capable of it. Mystery is how that's actually pronounced. The final and highest mystery, and I don't know if you are capable of it. I myself will tell you, and I won't stint any effort, and you must try to follow if you can. A lover who goes about this matter correctly must begin in his youth to develop himself to beautiful bodies. First, if the leader leads aright, he should love one body and beget beautiful ideas there. Then he should realize that the beauty of any one body is brother to the beauty of another, and that he is to pursue beauty of form. He'd be very foolish not to think that the beauty of all bodies is one and the same. When he grasps this, he must become a lover of all beautiful bodies, and he must think that this wild gaping after just one body is a small thing and despise it. After this, he must think that the beauty of people's souls is more valuable than the beauty of their bodies, so that if someone is decent in his soul, even though he is scarcely blooming in his body, our lover must be content to love and care for him and to seek to give birth to such ideas as will make young men better. The result is that our love will be forced to gaze at the beauty of activities and laws and to see that all this is akin to itself, with the result that he will think that the beauty of bodies is a thing of no importance. After customs, we must move on to various kinds of knowledge. The result is that he will see the beauty of knowledge and be looking mainly not at the beauty in a single example, as a servant would who favored the beauty of a little boy or a man or a single custom. Being a slave, of course, he's low and small minded, but the lover is turned to the great sea of beauty, and gazing upon this, he gives birth to many gloriously beautiful ideas and theories in unstinting love and wisdom, until having grown and then strengthened there, he catches sight of such knowledge, and it is the knowledge of such beauty. Try to pay attention to me as best you can. You see, the man who has been thus far guided in matters of eros, who has beheld beautiful things in the right order and correctly, is coming now to the goal of loving. All of a sudden, he will catch himself of something wonderfully beautiful in its nature. That, Socrates, is the reason for all his earlier labors. First, it always is and never comes to be, nor passes away, nor waxes, nor wanes. Love. Second, it is not beautiful this way and ugly that way, nor beautiful at one time and ugly at another, nor beautiful in relation to one thing and ugly in relation to another, nor is it beautiful here but ugly there, as it would be if it were beautiful for some people and ugly for others. Nor will the beautiful appear to him in the guise of a face or hands or anything else that belongs to the body. Body. When I hit the adi sound, for whatever reason, sounds African to me. I need to know how that sounds. Body is probably how that's pronounced in actual Greek. It will not appear to him as one idea or one kind of knowledge. It is not anywhere in in another thing, as in an animal or in earth or in heaven or in anything else, but instead, but itself by itself with itself. It is always one in form, and all the other beautiful things share in that in such a way that when those others comes to be or pass away, this does not become the least bit smaller or greater, nor suffer any change. I'm going to read that to you in plain English and see if you recognize this because it's Jesus. Gotta find the beginning of the sentence. I'm sorry. It is not anywhere in another thing, as in an animal, or in earth, or in heaven, or in anything else, but itself by itself with itself. It is always one in form, and all the other beautiful things share in that, in such a way that when those others come to be or pass away, this does not become the least bit smaller or greater, nor suffer any change. So when someone rises by these stages through loving boys correctly and begins to see this beauty, he has almost grasped his goal. This is what it is to go right or be led by another into the mystery of love. One goes always upwards for the sake of this beauty, starting out from beautiful things and using them like rising stairs from one body to two and from two to all beautiful things. Then from beautiful bodies to beautiful customs, and from customs to learning beautiful things. And from these lessons, he arrives in the end at his lesson, which is learning of this very beauty, so that in the end he comes to know just what it is to be beautiful. And therein lies Socrates, my friend, said the woman from Antonia. There, if anywhere, should a person live his life, beholding that beauty. If you see, if you once see that, it won't occur to you to measure beauty by gold or clothing or beautiful boys and youths. You, if you see them now, strike you out of their who, if you see them now, strike you out of your senses and make you and many others eager to be with the boys you love and look at them forever. If there were any way to do that, forgetting food and drink, everything but looking at them and being with them. But how would it be in our view if someone got to see the beautiful itself, absolute, pure, unmixed, not polluted by human flesh or colors or any other great nonsense of mortality, but if he could see the divine beauty in its one form? Do you think it would be a poor life for a human being to look there and to behold it by that which he ought, and to be with it? Or haven't you remembered that in that life alone, when he looks at beauty in the only way that beauty can be seen, only then it will become possible for him to give birth not to images of virtue, because he's in touch with no images, but to true virtue, because he is in touch with the true beauty. The love of the gods belongs to anyone who has given truth, given birth to true virtue, and nourished it. And if any human being could become immortal, it would be he. This, Phaedrus, and the rest of you, was what Diotima told me. I was persuaded. And once persuaded, I tried to persuade others too that human nature can find no better workmate for acquiring this than love. That's why I say that every man must honor love, why I honor the rights of Eros myself, and practice them with special diligence, and why I commend them to others. Now and always I praise the power and courage of Eros so far as I am able. Consider this speech, then, Phaedrus, if you will, a speech in praise of Eros, or if not, call it whatever and however you please to call it. Socrates' speech finished to loud applause. Meanwhile, Aristophanes was trying to make himself heard over their cheers in order to make a response to something Socrates had said about his own speech. Then, all of a sudden, there was even more noise. A large drunken party had arrived at the courtyard door, and they were rattling it loudly, accompanied by the shrieks of some flute girl they had brought along. Agathon at that point called to his slaves. Go see who it is. If it's people who know, invite them in. If not, tell them the party's over and we're about to turn in. A moment later, they heard Alcibiades shouting in the courtyard, very drunk and very loud. He wanted to know where Agathon was. He demanded to see Agathon at once. Actually, he was half carried into the house by the flute girl and by some other companions of his, but at the door he managed to stand by himself, crowned with a beautiful wreath of violets and ivy and gibbons in his hair.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm plastered, he announced. May I join your party? Or should I crown Agathon with this wreath, which is all I came to do anyway, and make myself scarce? I really couldn't make it yesterday, and nothing could stop me tonight. See, I'm wearing the garland myself. I want this crown to come directly from my head to the head that belongs, I don't mind saying, to the cleverest and best looking man in town. Ah, you think I'm drunk? Fine. Go ahead. I know I'm right anyway. Well, what do you say? May I join you on these terms? Will you have a drink with me or not?
Naturally, they all made a big fuss. They employed him to join them, they begged him to take a seat, and Agathon called him to his side. So Alcibiades, Alcibiades, again, with the help of his friends, approached Agathon. At the same time, he kept trying to take his ribbons off so that he could crown Agathon with them, but all he succeeded in doing was to push them further down his head until they finally slipped over his eyes. What with the ivy and all, he didn't see Socrates, who had made room for him on the couch as soon as he saw him. So Alcibiades sat down between Socrates and Agathon, and, as soon as he did so, he put his arms around Agathon, kissed him, and placed the ribbons on his head. Agathon asked his slaves to take Alcibiades' sandals off. We can all three fit on my couch, he said.
What a good idea!
Alcibiades replied.
But wait a moment, who's the third?
As he said this, he turned around, and it was only then that he saw Socrates. No longer had he seen him. Then he leaped up and cried,
Good Lord, what's going on here? It's Socrates! You've trapped me again. You always do this to me. All of a sudden, you turn up out of nowhere where I least expect you. Well, what do you want now? Why did you choose this particular couch? Why aren't you with Aristophanes or anyone else who would tease you about? But no, you figured out a way to find a place next to the most handsome man in the room.
I beg you, Agathon, Socrates said. Protect me from this man. You can't imagine what it's like to be in love with him. From the first moment he realized how I felt about him, he hasn't allowed me to say 2 words to anybody else. What am I saying? I can't so much as look at an attractive man, but he flies into a fit of jealous rage. He yells, he threatens. He can hardly keep from slapping me around. Please, try to keep him under control. Could you perhaps make him forgive me? And if you can't, if he gets violent when you defend me, the fierceness of his passion terrifies me.
I shall never forgive you, Alcibiades cries. I promise you, you'll pay for this, but for the moment, he said, turning to Agathon, give me some of these ribbons. I'd better make a wreath for him as well. Look at that magnificent head. Otherwise, I know he'll make a scene. He'll be grumbling that, though I crowned you for your first victory, I didn't honor him, even though he was never lost an argument in his life. So Alcibiades took the ribbons, arranged them on Socrates' head, and lay back on the couch. Immediately, however, he started up again. Friends, you look sober to me. We can't be having that. Let's have a drink. Remember our argument? Our agreement? We need a master of ceremonies. Who should it be? Well, at least you are all too drunk to care. I elect myself. Who else? Agathon, I want the largest cup around. No, wait. You. Bring me that cooling jar over there. He'd seen the cooling jar and realized it could hold more than 2 quarts of wine. He had the slaves fill it to the brim, drained it, and ordered them to fill it up again for Socrates. Not that the trick will have any effect on him, he told the group. Socrates will drink whatever you put in front of him, but no one has yet seen him drink. That's not who said that. Whatever. The slave filled the jar and, while Socrates was drinking,
Eryximachus said to Alcibiades, "This is certainly most improper. We cannot simply pour the wine down our throats in silence. We must have some conversation, or at least a song. What are we doing now? What we are doing now is hardly civilized." What Alcibiades said next to him was this: "Oh, Eryximachus, best possible son to the best possible, the most temperate father. Hi." "Greetings to you," Eryximachus replied. "Now, what do you suggest we do?" "Whatever you say. Ours to obey you. For a medical mind is worth a million others. Please prescribe what you think of it." Listen to me. Earlier this evening, we decided to use this occasion to offer a series of encomia of love. We all took our turn, in good order, from left to right, and gave our speeches, each according to his ability. You are the only one not to have spoken yet, though, if I may say so, you have certainly drunk your share. It is only proper, therefore, that you take your turn now. After you have spoken, you can decide on a topic for Socrates on your right. He can then do the same for the man to his right, and we can go around the table once again. "Well said, well said, Marcus. But do you really think it's fair to put my drunken ramblings next to your sober orientations? And it's fair to put my and anyway, my dear fellow, I hope you didn't believe a single word Socrates said. The truth is just the opposite. He's the one who will most surely beat me up if I dare praise anyone else in his presence, even a god." "Hold your tongue," Socrates said. "By God, don't you dare deny it. I would never praise anyone else with you around." "Well, why not just do that if you want?" Eryximachus suggested. "Why don't you offer an encomium to Socrates?" "What do you mean? Do you really think so, Eryximachus? Should I unleash myself upon him? Should I give him punishment in front of all of you?" "Now, wait a minute," Socrates said. "What do you have in mind? Are you going to praise me only in order to mock me? Is that it?" "I'll only tell the truth. Please let me." "I would certainly like to hear the truth from you, but by all means, go ahead." "Nothing can stop me now. But here's what you can do. If I say anything that's not true, you can just interrupt if you want and correct me. At worst, there'll be mistakes in my speech, not lies. But you can hold it against me if I don't get everything in the right order. I'll say things as they come to mind. It's no easy task for one in my condition to give a smooth and orderly account of your bizarreness. I'll try to praise Socrates, my friends, but I'll have no use in image. And though he may think I'm trying to make fun of him, I assure you my image is no joke. It aims at the truth. Look at him. Isn't he just like a statue of Silenus? You know the kind of statue I mean. You'll find them in any shop in town. It's a Silenus sitting, his flute or his pipes in his hands, and it's hollow. It's split right down the middle, and it's inside. It's full of tiny statues of the gods. Now look at him again. Isn't he also just like the satyr Marsyas? Nobody, not even you, Socrates, can deny that you look like them. But the resemblance goes beyond appearances you're about to hear. You are impudent, contemptuous, and vile. Now, if you won't admit it, I'll bring witnesses. And you're quite a flute player, aren't you? In fact, you're much more marvelous than Marsyas, who needed instruments to cast his spells on people. So, does anyone who plays his tunes today? For even the tunes Olympus played on Marsyas' work, since Olympus learned everything from him. Whether they are played by the greatest flautist or the meanest flute girl, his melodies have in themselves the power to possess and to reveal those people who are ready for the God and his mysteries. That's because his melodies are themselves divine. The only difference between you and Marsyas is that you need no instruments. You do exactly what he does, but with words alone. Who knew? People, you know, People hardly ever take a speaker seriously, even if he's the greatest orator, but let alone man, child, or woman, listen to you, or even to a poor account of what you say. And we are all transported, completely possessed. If I were to describe for you what an extraordinary effect his words have always had on me, I can feel it this moment, even as I'm speaking. You might actually suspect that I'm drunk. Still, I swear to you, the moment he starts speaking, I am beside myself. My heart starts leaping in my chest. The tears come streaming down my face. Even the frenzied Corybantes seems sane compared to me. And let me tell you, I am not alone. I have heard Pericles and many other great orators, and I have admired their speeches. But nothing like this has happened to me. They never upset me so deeply that my very own soul started protesting that my life was no better than the most miserable slaves, and yet that is exactly how this Marcius here at my side makes me feel all the time. He makes it seem that my life isn't worth living. You can't say that isn't true, Socrates. I know very well that you could make me feel this way, that way, this very moment if I gave you half a chance. He always traps me, you see, and he makes me admit that my political career is a waste of time. While all that matters is just what I most neglect, my personal shortcomings, which cry out for the closest attention. So I refuse to listen to him. I stop my ears and tear myself away from him, for like the sirens, he could make me stay by his side till I die. Socrates is the only man who has made me feel shame. Ah, you don't think I had it in me, did you? Yes, he made me feel ashamed. I know perfectly well what I can't prove. He's wrong when he tells me what I should do. Yet the moment I leave his side, I go back to my old ways. I cave in to my desire to please the crowd. My whole life has become one constant effort to escape from him and keep away. But when I see him, I feel deeply ashamed because I'm doing nothing about my way of life, though I have already agreed with him that I should. Sometimes, believe me, I think I would be happier if he were dead. And yet I know that if he dies, I'll be even more miserable. I can't live with him, and I can't live without him. What can I do with him? That's the effect of this satyr's music on me and many others. But that's the least of it. He's like these creatures in all sorts of other ways. His powers are really extraordinary. Let me tell you about them, because you can be sure of it, none of you really understands him. Not now I've started. I'm going to show you what he really is. To begin with, he's crazy about beautiful boys. He constantly follows them around in a perpetual daze. Also, he likes to say he's ignorant and knows nothing. Isn't this just like Silenus? Of course it is. And all this is just on the surface, like the outsides of those statues of Silenus. I wonder, my fellow drinkers, if you have any idea what a sober and temperate man he proves to be once you have looked inside. Believe me, it couldn't matter less to him whether a boy is beautiful. You can't imagine how little he cares whether a person is beautiful or rich or famous in any other way that most people admire. He considers all these possessions beneath contempt. And that's exactly how he considers all of us as well. In public, I tell you, his whole life is one a big game of irony. I don't know if any of you have seen him when he's really serious. But once I caught him. When he was open, like Silenus' statues, and I had a glimpse of the figures he keeps hidden within.
They were so godlike, so bright and beautiful, so utterly amazing that I no longer had a choice. I just had to do whatever he told me. What I thought at the time was that what he really wanted was me. And that seemed to me the luckiest coincidence. All I had to do was let him have his way with me, and he would teach me everything he knew. Believe me, I had a lot of confidence in my looks. Naturally, up to that time, we'd never been alone together. One of my attendants had always been present. With this in mind, I sent the attendant away and let Socrates alone. You see, in this company, I must tell the whole truth, so pay attention. And Socrates, if I say anything untrue, I want you to correct me. So there I was, my friends, alone with him at last. My idea, naturally, was that he'd take advantage of the opportunity to tell me whatever it is that lovers say when they find themselves alone. I relished the moment, but no such luck. Nothing of the sort occurred. Socrates had his usual sort of conversation with me, and at the end of the day, he went off. My next idea was to invite him to the gymnasium with me. We took exercise together, and I was sure that this would lead to something. He took exercise and wrestled with me many times when no one else was present. What can I tell you? I got nowhere. When I realized that my ploy had failed, I decided on a frontal attack. I refused to retreat from a battle I myself had begun, and I needed to know just where matters stood, so what I did was to invite him to dinner, as if I were his lover and he were my young prey. To tell the truth, I took him quite a while to accept my invitation, but one day he finally arrived. That first time, he left right after dinner. I was too shy to try to stop him, but on my next attempt, I started some discussion just as we were finishing our meal and kept him talking late into the night. When he said he should be going, I used the lateness of the hour as an excuse and managed to persuade him to spend the night made at my house. He had his meal on the couch next to mine, so he just made himself comfortable and lay down to it. No one else was there. Now, you must admit that my story so far has been perfectly decent. I have told it in any company. I could have told it in any company. But you'd never have heard me tell the rest of it, as you're about to do, if it weren't that, as the saying goes, there's truth in wine when the slaves have left. And when they're present, too. Also, would it be fair for Socrates for me to praise him, and yet to fail to realize one of his proudest accomplishments? And furthermore, you know what people say about snakebite, and you'll only talk about it with your fellow victims. Only they will understand the pain and forgive you for all the things it made you do. Well, something much more painful than a snake has bitten me in my most sensitive part. I mean my heart, or my soul, or whatever you want to call it, which has been struck and bitten by philosophy, whose grip on young and eager souls is much more vicious than a viper's and makes them do the most amazing things. Now, all you people here, Phaedrus, Agathon, Eryximachus, Pausanias, Aristodemus, Aristophanes. I need not mention Socrates himself, and all the rest have all shared in the madness, the Bacchic frenzy of philosophy. And that's why you will hear the rest of the story. You will understand and forgive both what I did then and what I say now, and for the house slaves and for anyone else who is not an intimate. My story's not for you. Block your ears. To get back to the story, the lights were out, the slaves had left, the time was right, I thought, to come to the point and tell him freely what I had in mind. So I shook him and I whispered, Socrates, are you asleep? No, not at all, he replied. You know what I've been thinking? Well, no, not really. I think you're the only worthy lover I have ever had. And yet, look how shy you are with me. Well, here's how I look at it. It would be really stupid not to give you anything you want. You can have me, my belongings, anything my friends might have. Nothing is more important to me than becoming the best man I can be, and no one can help me more than you to reach that aim. With a man like you, in fact, I'd be much more ashamed of what wise men would say if I did not take you as my lover than I would be of what all the others in their foolishness would say if I did. He heard me out, and then he said in that absolutely inimitable, ironic manner of his, "Dear Alcibiades, if you are right in what you say about me, you are already more accomplished than you think. If I really have it in me already, in me the power to make you a better man, then you can see in me a beauty that is really beyond description and makes your own remarkable good looks pale in comparison. But then, is this a fair exchange that you propose? You seem to me to want more than your proper share. You offer me the merest appearance of beauty in return. You want the thing itself, gold in exchange for bronze. Still, my dear boy, you should think twice because you could be wrong, and I may be of no use to you. The mind's sight becomes sharp only when the body's eyes go past their prime, and you are still a good long time away from that." When I heard this, I replied, "I really have nothing more to say. I've told you exactly what I think. Now it's your turn to consider what you think best for you and for me." "You're right about that," he answered. "In the future, let's consider things together. We'll always do what seems the best, the two of us." His words made me think that my own had finally hit their mark, that he was smitten with my words. I didn't give him a chance to say another word. I stood up immediately and placed my mantle over the light cloak, which, though it was the middle of winter, was his only clothing. I slipped underneath the cloak and put my arms around the man, this utterly unnatural, this truly extraordinary man, and spent the whole next night with him. Sorry, the whole night next to him. Socrates, you can't deny a word of it. But in spite of all my efforts, this hopelessly arrogant, this unbelievably insolent man, he turned me down. He spurned my beauty, of which I was so proud, members of the jury, for this is really what you are. You're here to sit in judgment of Socrates' amazing arrogance and pride. Be sure of it. I swear to you by all the gods and goddesses together, my night with Socrates went no further than if I had spent it with my own father or older brother. How do you think I felt about this? Of course, I was deeply humiliated, but also I couldn't help admiring his natural character, his moderation, his fortitude. Here is a man whose strength and wisdom went beyond my wildest dreams. How could I bring myself to hate him? I couldn't bear to lose his friendship. How could I possibly win him over? I knew very well that money meant much less to him than enemy weapons ever meant to Ajax, and the only trap by means of which I had thought I might capture him already passed, proved a dismal failure. I had no idea what to do, no purpose in life. But no one else has ever known the real meaning of slavery. All this had already occurred when Athens invaded Potidæa, where we served together and shared the same mess. Now, first, he took the hardships of the campaign much better than I ever did, much better, in fact, than anyone in the whole company. When we were cut off from our supplies, as often happened in the field, no one else stood up to hunger as well as he did, and yet he was the one man who could really enjoy a feast. And though he didn't want to drink when he had to, he could drink the best of us under the table. Still, and most amazingly, no one ever saw him drink, as we'll straightway put to the test.
Add to this his amazing resistance to cold, and let me tell you, the winter there is something awful. Once I arrived, it was frightfully cold. No one so much as stuck his nose outside. If we absolutely had to leave our tent, we wrapped ourselves in anything we could lay our hands on and tied extra pieces of felt or sheepskin around our boots. Well, Socrates went out in that weather wearing nothing but his same old light cloak, and even in bare feet he made better progress on the ice than the other soldiers did in their boots. You could have seen the looks they gave him. They thought he was doing it to spite them. So much for that. But you should hear what else he did during that same campaign. The exploit our strong hero at heart dared to do. One day at dawn, he started thinking about some other problem or other. He stood just outside trying to figure it out. He couldn't resolve it, but he wouldn't give up. He simply stood there, glued to the same spot. By midday, many soldiers had seen him, and quite mystified, they told everyone that Socrates had been standing there all day, thinking about something. He was still there when everyone came, and after dinner, some Ionians moved their bedding outside, where it was cooler and more comfortable. All this took place in the summer, but mainly in order to watch if Socrates was going to stay out there all night. So he did. He stood on the very same spot until dawn. He only left next morning when the sun came out, and he made his prayers to the new day. And if you would like to know what he was like in battle, this is a tribute he really deserves. You know that I was decorated for bravery during that campaign. Well, during that very campaign, Socrates single handedly saved my life. He absolutely did. He just refused to leave me behind. And I was wounded, and he rescued not only me, but my armor as well. For my part, Socrates, I told them right then that the decoration really belonged to you, and you can blame me neither for doing so than for saying so now. But the generals, who seemed much more concerned with my social position, insisted on giving the decoration to me, and I must say, you were more eager than the generals themselves for me to have it. You should also have seen him at our horrible retreat from Delium. I was there with the cavalry while Socrates was a foot soldier. The army had almost dispersed in all directions, and Socrates was retreating together with lackeys. I happened to see them just by chance, and the moment I did, I started shouting encouragements to them, telling them I was never going to leave their side, and so on. That day, I had a better opportunity to watch Socrates than I ever had at Plotodea. For being on horseback, I wasn't in very great danger. Well, it was easy to see that he was remarkably more collected than the lackeys, but when I looked again, I couldn't get your words, Aristophanes, out of my mind. In the midst of the battle, he was making his way exactly as he does around town, with swaggering gait and roving eye. He was observing everything quite calmly, looking out for friendly troops and keeping an eye on the ground. But even from a great distance, it was obvious that this was a very brave man who would put up a terrific fight if anyone approached him. This is what saved both of them. For, as a rule, you try to put as much distance as you can between your such self and such men in battle. You go after the others, those who run away helter skelter. You could say many other marvelous things in praise of Socrates. Perhaps he shares some of the specific accomplishments with others, but, as a whole, he is unique. He is like no one else in the past and no one in the present. This is by far the most amazing thing about him. For he might be able to form an idea of what Achilles was like by comparing him to Brasidas or some other great warrior, or we might compare Pericles with Nestor or Antenor or one of the other great orators. There is a parallel for everyone else, that is. But this man here is so bizarre, his ways and his ideas are so unusual that, search as you might, you'll never find anyone else, alive or dead, who's even remotely like him. The best you can do is not compare him to anything human, but to liken him, as I do, to Silenus and the satyrs. And the same goes for his ideas and arguments. Come to think of it, I should have mentioned this much earlier. Even his ideas and arguments are just like those hollow statues of Silenus. If you were to listen to his arguments at first, they'd strike you as totally ridiculous. They're clothed in words as coarse as the hides worn by the most vulgar satyrs. He's always going on about pack-asses or blacksmiths or cobblers or tanners. He's always making some tired old points in the same tired old words. If you are foolish or simply unfamiliar with him, you'd find it impossible not to laugh at his arguments. But if you see them when they open up like the statues, if you go behind their surface, you'll realize that no other arguments make any sense. They're truly worthy of a god bursting with figures of every virtue inside. They're of great, no, the greatest importance for anyone who wants to become a truly great man. Well, this is my praise of Socrates, though I haven't spared him my reproach either. I told you how horribly he treated me, and not only me, but also Charmides, Euthydemus, and many others. He has deceived us all. He presents himself as your lover, and before you know it, you're in love with him yourself. I warn you, Agathon, don't let him fool you. Remember our torments. Be on your guard. Don't wait, like the fool in the proverb, to learn your lesson from your own misfortune. Alcibiades' frankness provoked a lot of laughter, especially since it was obvious that he was still in love with Socrates, who immediately said to him, "You're perfectly sober after all, Alcibiades. Otherwise you could never have concealed your motive so gracefully. How casually you let it drop, almost like an afterthought, at the very end of your speech, as if the real point of all this has not been simply to make trouble between Agathon and me. You think that I should be in love with you and no one else, while you and no one else should be in love with Agathon. Well, we were not deceived. We've seen through your little satyr play. Agathon, my friend, don't let him get away with it. Let no one come between us." Agathon said to Socrates, "I'm beginning to think you're right. Isn't it proof of that? Isn't it proof of that he literally came between us here on the couch? Why would he do this if he weren't set on separating us? But he doesn't get away with it. Him coming right over to lie down next to you. Wonderful. Come here on my other side. My God! How I suffer in his hands! He kicks me when I'm down. He never lets me go. Come. Don't be selfish, Socrates. At least let's compromise. Let Agathon lie down between us." "Why, that's impossible," Socrates said. "You have already delivered your praise of me, and now it's my turn to praise whoever's on my right. But if Agathon were next to you, he'd have to praise me all over again, instead of having me speak in his honor, as I very much want to do in any case. Don't be jealous. Let me praise the boy." "Oh, marvelous! Alcibiades, nothing can make me stay next to you now. I'm moving no matter what. I simply must hear what Socrates has to say about me." "There we go again," said Alcibiades. "It's the same old story. When Socrates is around, nobody else can get close to a good-looking man. Look how smoothly and plausibly he found a reason for Agathon to lie down next to him." And then, all of a sudden, while Agathon was changing places, a large, drunken group, finding the gates open because someone was just leaving, walked into the room and joined the party. There was noise everywhere, and everyone was made to start drinking again in no particular order. At that point, Aristodemus said, Eryximachus, Phaedrus, and some others among the original guests made their excuses and left. He himself fell asleep and slept for a long time. It was winter, and the nights were quite long. He woke up just as dawn was about to break. The roosters were crowing already. He saw that the others had either left or were asleep on their couches, and that only Agathon, Aristophanes, and Socrates were still awake, drinking out of a large cup, which they were passing around from left to right. Socrates was talking to them. Aristodemus couldn't remember exactly what they were saying. He'd missed the first part of their discussion, and he was half asleep anyway.
But the main point was that Socrates was trying to prove to them that authors should be able to write both comedy and tragedy. The skillful tragic dramatist should also be a comic poet. He was about to clinch his argument, though, to tell the truth, sleepy as they were hardly able to follow his reasoning. In fact, Aristophanes fell asleep in the middle of the discussion, and very soon thereafter, as day was breaking, Agathon also drifted off. But after getting them off to sleep, Socrates got up and left, and Aristodemus followed them, as always. He said that Socrates went directly to the Lyceum, washed up, spent the rest of the day just as he always did, and only then, as evening was falling, went home to rest. Socrates and I are fucking similar dudes. That's what my life was like while I was doing the hate reads on the regular, and especially while I was doing the watering hole spaces on Twitter. And if you haven't, you should check those out while they're still up. An atheist came on my show and said some things that got it deleted from Twitter, so find it before the rest of them get deleted. All right, my Patreon is the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. I have Cash App. I believe that's also Shaggy Dog Philosopher. I have Patreon, which is probably Shaggy Philosopher. I'm not getting monetized for this. No amount of views, no amount of likes is going to get me paid. I'm fucking hungry. Tired. 3 hours feels like a good amount of time. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here. Chance this is the last time I talk to you, so I hope you learned something about love. I hope you learned something about a philosopher aesthetic, and I hope you learned just the smallest fucking fraction about me, you cosmic idiot. I love you. Take care of your stupid self. That's really all that matters to me.